Good evening. My name's Chuck Iovan, and I'll be presiding over this evening's meeting of the Planning Board, June 25th, 2025. First thing we're going to do is for those in attendance under the provisions of the open meeting law, attendees are being informed that this meeting is being recorded by Urban Media Arts and will be live streamed on the Malden Access MATV YouTube site. I have not been notified that any other video or audio recording of this meeting will occur. The next thing we will do is, starting with Tawadage, we will do a roll call.
Tawadaj Gabrasillasi Planning Board.
Diane Shuha, Planning Board.
Kevin Tanucci, Planning Board.
Chuck Iovan, Planning Board.
Pat Hayes, Planning Board.
Risa Gray, Planning Board.
Stephanie Stone, Planning Board.
Michelle Ferguson, Planning Board.
Thank you very much. The first item on the agenda this evening is 245 Bryant Street. Diane, could you read the notice?
The Malden Planning Board will hold a public hearing in the Herbert L. Jackson Council Chamber, Malden City Hall, 215 Pleasant Street, Malden, Mass. At 7 p.m. on Wednesday, June 25th, 2025, on the petition of ACDC 245 Bryant LLC in permit application number CMID-069419-2024, seeking a special permit under Title 12 Code of the City of Malden, Sections 12.12.010.c, 12.12.300, and 12.28.010.d, to allow the conversion of pre-existing non-conforming property in the Residence A zoning district for the use as a multifamily dwelling up to 3 stories and an inclusionary development at the site of a preferably preserved building, namely to construct a building with 3 stories and a total of 35 affordable housing units at the property known as and numbered 245 Bryant Street, Malden, Mass., and by City's Assessor's Parcel Identification Number 097424414.
Thank you very much, Diane. Is the petitioner present? I'd like to remind everyone to talk into the microphones, please. And also, if you're speaking at the podium, please give us your name and residential address for the record and sign the clipboard.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having us this evening. My name is Müge Undemir. I live at 6 Arborough Road in Boston, Massachusetts. We're happy to present today on our project at 245 Bryant Street. I'm going to give a bit of an overview, then pass it over to our architect and our transportation team to just kind of give some more background on the project today. So I'm the real estate director at Asian CDC. We're a local community development corporation. We develop affordable housing and rental and home ownership opportunities. We also do a lot of work with the community around doing home ownership access, first-time home buyer workshops in both English, and we are one of the few organizations that also offer it interpreted into Chinese. So we work very closely with Malden Youth and with Boston Youth as well, where we do most of our development. So this is just to give you some context to situate you on the site. So that marker right there is 245 Bryant Street, and just generally giving you an overlay of where it is located in the general area. These are the current existing conditions. There is a religious building on site, of which we are working with the existing tenants who sold the building to us, and we have been working with them to continue to they're staying at the site currently, and they'll soon be leaving the site to enter their new development and their new property. And here is an additional image of the existing conditions on site. And the existing site plan, which I think lends a little bit to the discussion we're going to have today on the different zoning related implications that both the existing building has and the proposed building has. Before we get into that, I think we were really just looking to develop this, and I'll let our architect speak to this, but to develop this new construction with affordable homeownership units, and we are meeting some of the zoning requirements, but also asking for further relief on others. But I will turn it over to my colleague Janice to talk a little bit more about the architecture.
Hi, my name's Janice Mamayak. I'm a principal at Icon Architecture. I'm 30 Trenton Street, Melrose, Mass. So what you're seeing on the screen is some images of where we have landed after our work with the Malden Historic Commission in looking at the existing structure and being influenced by some of those features. I think it's just as easily, I'll stay on the slide. Some of the articulation of the existing temple were reflecting really distinct volumes, the use of masonry, some tall vertical window expression, and we tried to integrate those into the design here. Above is looking from more on the eastern avenue end of Bryant, and the lower photo is coming more from the Grape Street, looking at that. There we go. In elevation then, you can see again, the top two are the courtyards, and then we've got, I'm gonna go back to this one, it's better to see in 3D. We use the articulation with the brick, the tall vertical windows, the distinct volumes on Bryant Street. Bryant Street stands as a really proud kind of civic facade with a central entrance. The arch form at the entry is reflective of the temple's arch form at that entry. And then as you go down Newton Street, we're expressing more of a smaller scale, similar to the single families that go along that street. And that's articulated with the bays that you can see there. As Muge mentioned, 35 affordable home ownership units, 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. They're primarily 2 bedrooms. We have parking spaces for 36, so more than the 1-to-1 unit. Indoor parking spaces, there's an indoor bike parking right off the entrance off the courtyard. So the Bryant Street is kind of that public entrance, and we go through to the, here we go on the site plan. There's a through lobby, so that front entrance up Bryant and the rear entrance for the residents connect. The parking access is through the green space usable by the residents. So as Muge mentioned, we are in compliance primarily of all the setbacks, though it says improving the setbacks. The Bryant Street and Newton Street, we are improving on what the existing non-compliant setback is. Adding density, we are asking for 35 units instead of the 34 allowed with the bonus density, the density bonus. And then we're increasing the usable open space as illustrated in the green from what is currently on the site. And with that, I'm going to, as we mentioned, we've been working with the Historic Commission over the past couple of months, and that's where we came up with this final design, or this current design. We will be continuing to work with them on a monthly basis with monthly updates as we work through specific materiality and, as noted here, working with them to archive all the artifacts in the existing building. And now, I'm going to turn it over to Derek.
Well, Miss, before you go on, can I ask a couple
sure.
questions? Can you delineate what you're doing that's going to satisfy the requirements of the Historic Commission?
So, when we looked at the existing building, and maybe it's good if I go back to some of those existing photographs. Whoops. So the existing building has a lot of distinct shapes. It's kind of an aggregation of various geometries, but the masonry that's used on that building is kind of a key prominent feature, as well as, I don't know if you could see the cursor, but the kind of cornice windows around that volume, and then the next image is, there we go. The tall vertical windows. So between the distinct volumes, the use of the masonry and tall vertical window expression, that's as we had worked with them, and that was as approved by them. Yeah.
They were also interested in preserving the history of the site. So one of the other things that we're doing is creating a publicly accessible open space at the front corner of the building which will have historic markers that actually address not only the history of the architect and the congregation, but also generally the square that had existed previous to urban renewal. So it'll touch on those three aspects, which is what they had requested from us. The language has yet to be determined and will be coordinated with the commission as well as with residents who would like to be engaged in that process. And the other portion of that is as the existing tenants are vacating the building, they will be leaving, if they are leaving any artifacts that we can claim, as in they're not religious materials that don't have to be disposed of or gotten rid of in a certain way, that we would then collect those items and share them with the city of Malden, but also with the Malden Historic Society. So those are the three big picture other items that we're doing aside from just the design of the building.
Okay, and on the masonry, I didn't see it really in the renderings, but is that going to be very similar to the masonry that's existing now? It's just not being shown on the rendering?
The rendering, the masonry's on the base here, so that orange color, that's all intended to be masonry, kind of wrapping the volume on Bryant Street. And look, can you see my cursor?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. As well as on that prominent Bryant and Newton Street corner, kind of grounding that with a wrap of masonry there. As well as, sorry, I didn't mention that earlier, the cornice articulation at that volume too is reflecting that cornice that we saw on the existing temple with the more ribbon punched openings at the top.
Okay.
Ground that corner.
Okay, thank you. Oh, and since we're here, before you call up the next team, can you go back to the landscaping?
The site plan? Yep.
Yeah, why is only some of it colored in green? I see on the left side and across the top, there's also lawn. How's that different than what you're calling the open space and the resident?
The dimension, the width of it.
Okay, so
But
you
it's all-
didn't
it is
highlight
all-
it because it didn't
It's all
satisfy
green,
the zoning?
technically, yes.
But
Yeah,
it's-
this is all green and like, other than the path to the, the stairway there, but would all be landscaped in green. It's just of a narrower dimension to qualify as the calculation for open space.
Okay,
So the green is usable open space.
okay, thank you. I don't see any other questions,
okay.
so if you want to move on to the
Then we'll pass it on to Derek at the next.
traffic discussion?
Oh, yes.
Hi, yes, my name is Derek Roach. I work for Vanassin Associates. We're the traffic engineers on this project. So we did a traffic study, general traffic study following state standards, all that. And it was peer reviewed. There were few comments from the peer reviewer that was also reflected in the letter from the staff. Two of which, with the install proposed curb cuts and geometry for the signage for the proposed one-way circulation throughout the parking lot, we agree with that. Implement the transportation demand measurement measures that were in the study, we agree with that. Then there were the three that I have listed here. Improve the sight lines. We started the coordination with that in terms of making sure that we can remove some of those spaces. In the end, we're adding spaces other places with the closures of other curb cuts for the project. So I think we end up with a surplus of one parking space for the area. So we don't foresee any big challenges with getting that approved. In terms of the optimizing of the traffic signal, we had suggested that that's an existing condition. Our project has almost a non-existent impact at that intersection in the AM. It's a 1.2% increase over no build in terms of the overall delay at the intersection. In the PM, it's a 0.2% increase, second increase. Sorry, I said percent first, I'm sorry. It was a 1.2 second increase in the AM and a 0.2 second increase in the PM, which is like I said, non-existent to, it would essentially go unnoticed to users of the roadway. And we don't increase the level of service of any of the movements of that intersection. Although I'm saying that to just indicate how little of an impact we have there. Optimizing the traffic signal is not a huge task. It wouldn't cost all that much, so the applicant has indicated that they would be willing to do that improvement. The improvement in terms of doing the study at looking at the safety issues at the intersection, that could potentially lead to very significant cost for safety improvements. So we're trying to just get, and we've reached out to the city engineer on these as well, some additional information on what they're expecting out of that condition. And I think that the rest of the team can explain more about what they see on terms of the monetary aspects of the project. So that's sort of where we stand with that. We're not saying we're not willing to do any of these at all. We're in the process of doing some additional coordination with the town on these, and that's sort of where we stand. So I guess I turn it back to the rest of the town, or rest of the team, unless there's questions.
I do have one question.
Sure.
The 3 spots that are being referenced
Yeah.
on Grape Street,
Yeah.
right? Are those on your traffic study, page 18, are those the 3 spots that are within the blue triangle?
Correct.
Okay, it's not the other side. 'Cause-
Correct.
Okay. I just wasn't sure which piece of it was and where you
Yep.
were trying to get the sight line, whether it was up Grape Street or down to Bryant Street for
Yeah,
pulling
upgrade
out.
street, not down to Bryant. Right?
Okay.
Unless I'm mistaken. Hold on. I had it a second ago. Yeah, up Grape Street, not towards Bryant. Correct.
Do you have can you show the location and point it out? Thank you.
You want to look on that, oh, there it is, on here, if you want to. Is it on there?
So, yeah, so it would be this area. Oh, I'm sorry, I touched the screen, I
No,
messed
it's
everything up.
okay.
No, it's okay.
It's down here, sorry.
But it's on
So
that area.
it's just, I'm going to call it south, though I know it's probably west.
Correct, south on this
Just
picture.
West, south of the exit.
Correct.
Right, okay.
Any other questions?
I don't have any. Does anyone else have any questions for the traffic engineer? Go ahead, Michelle, then.
Yeah, thank you. My question is, in terms of the recommendation to study these contributing factors, and this is regarding, for the board's reference, the city peer reviewer for this project, BSC Group. You have a copy of their peer review report. It's dated
Yep.
June 12th, 2025.
Yep.
And one of the authors, Bill Pale, is here tonight if we had any questions. I want to recognize him. But so this is recommendation number 12, which recommends that the petitioner provide a discussion of potential contributing factors to there's a high prevalence of crashes at Eastern Ave and Bryant Street, including vulnerable user crashes, pedestrians, and cyclists. I'm reading from that report. So the request was for a discussion to include specific safety measures that could be implemented as part of this project. BSC is available to review any proposed safety measures. So I just wanted to ask, it's not clear, are you saying you wouldn't look at providing the study or the report, or you're
No.
concerned with implementing
Correct.
measures that might be recommended?
Yeah, so there could be potentially measures that would be recommended that could be upwards of, tens of thousands of dollars.
Okay. So you would be willing to study and provide
Absolutely.
the city with the background? I know the city, I had a chance to speak to the city engineer, and we can get to that later on. But he commented that that intersection at Eastern Ave and Bryant, I believe the city is going to be looking, and I'll find the exact date he gave me, looking to possibly upgrade that in 5 years or so. So this would be, you know, background info that the city could potentially use. Well, I'm saying that's an option as opposed to requiring you to implement it now doesn't,
Right.
if we're gonna be redoing the intersection. So I think it was, a way we could look at it would be for you to provide some of the data or the background so that, you know, different measures will be prepared to then consider implementing them, we meaning the city. So I'm curious, would
Gotcha.
you be willing to,
Yeah.
to provide any, you know, basically a report or study of that?
Yeah, so the cost of doing the study of assessing different measures to implement is that's something we can handle. It's the fact that some of the recommendations potentially could be, you know, if we for example, I don't want to put any two things out, but you know, one of the things you could do is put overhead signals instead of having them be on that would be potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars, requiring upgrading the signal cabinet, all the signal equipment, all of that. That is not something this project could withstand. So that's our issue with the language. It sounded like you were requesting us to suggest things that we would implement, and we're happy to implement low-cost things that we can handle. I mean, again, I'm not the money person here, but suggestions that would be very good for the intersection could be very expensive for us. So that was the issue was with that language. But if the language means with the city to implement, then maybe we could just amend that language to add that it wouldn't be us implementing, but we would be providing the suggestions for the city to then implement.
Okay, yeah, I think the recommendation was to include specific safety measures that could be implemented as part of the project, but it's up to the board whether to consider, you know,
Right.
just requiring you to identify the measures as opposed to implementing them. So that's one thing. And I will note that the city engineer told me the tentative plan would be for the new signal at that intersection 2029 in the 2031 timeframe. And he did specifically mention the overhead signal, or whatever you call it, not overhead.
Right.
the
Whether
mast
it's
signal.
mast arms or if you did.
Right, so I think that may be already possibly in
wire,
the works. I think,
Okay.
you know, but we can get
Right,
to
so
that when you get
that's
to
why
that.
I
just wanna
said
clarify.
we reached out for additional clarity on stuff like that. So we're in the middle of trying to get, we haven't heard back yet, so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'm just gonna click through, sorry. Yep, I believe that is the end of our presentation, so we're happy to answer any questions, if there are any remaining, of course.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes, there's a few. What would be the timeline on starting this project and finishing it? Because I know you got a project going on Main Street that, I don't know what happened there.
I can
but
also-
Is funding already in place for this project?
No, so we cannot apply for funding until we have a special permit from the city, and it's mainly because that helps support whoever's providing the subsidy. In this case, we would be applying for funds from the city, as well as applying for Commonwealth Builder funds. So Commonwealth Builder is the only funder for homeownership projects in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So they like to see that your project is ready, meaning it has special permits, it has historic commission approval, for example. And so once those things are all in line, we are able to then apply for funding. Funding it depends on what subsidy you're applying for. It could take anywhere from, if there's a funding round, so for the city, it's a rolling funding round, whereas Commonwealth Builders is actually creating a new funding round for this summer. So we would likely apply to those things, but in the same time, we wouldn't start construction, obviously, until we were able to secure funding, able to secure investors, able to secure a general contractor, but also to continue our engagement and with residents, but also with the Historic Commission. So all those things have to kind of come together, and slowly the pieces come to fruition. So if we could, the best case scenario, we would start construction in Q2 of 2026. So March,
Okay.
April.
So you think you can put it together in 9 months?
Potentially, we're at a good place with the designs. We do have to get to construction documents. That doesn't always take very long, but I think it would take anywhere from 3 to 6 months to secure funding, and then from there, and at that same time, we'd be progressing the design. So basically, it's really about securing an investor and securing the funding. And once those two things align, it's a lot easier to get the process moving and close on construction, which usually takes a couple months.
Now, does that mean that you haven't closed on the property yet?
We
Because you don't have financing?
We do own the site. We have purchased the site. So we have financing to have purchased the site. So we are the owner, and the tenant currently is occupying the site until their new congregation location is prepared.
Okay, and how long do you think it would take to complete the construction?
Construction will likely take 18 months.
Okay. Can you talk about, I saw on the plans that you've got a trash area.
Correct.
Michelle, is there a concern about that, that it isn't set back enough?
The proposed trash storage area is in violation of the requirement, which prohibits siting within 20 feet of a property line. So they are seeking relief on that
So
requirement.
they're not looking to move it, they're looking for us to provide relief as part of the special permit.
That's my understanding. They can clarify that. It's shown it's at the
Correct.
northern corner there of
Right.
the parking lot, and that is in violation. This board would need to grant relief under the special permit to allow that location.
Okay, and that's what you're seeking?
Yes, we are. We would obviously screen the trash area from the street and from, just to allow for access for the residents to take their trash out to the site. It's mainly a negotiation of where on the site it would be able to go, with the amount of parking required, one per unit. It does take up a good portion of the site. And then again, the geometry of the physical site itself and the existing building, it just lent to be in that location. I don't know if, Janice, you want to speak to the decision-making behind that a little more.
Well, if I could add, we had looked at other locations, looking at East Newton Street as a potential, but that was directly abutting an existing residential parcel. And so we, in looking at the lesser of the evils, or thinking that the Grape Street one by the entrance would be not adjacent to someone's home.
Okay. Can you also speak to the screening from the other residents? As I understand it, it's being proposed to be a chain link fence, and I believe the staff has recommended that be screened at it.
Correct. So I think we had originally shown that as chain link, but we can change that. That's not a requirement. That's just what was, we will happily change that in the plans.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Can you speak a little bit about the inclusionary zoning and speak to the fact, I understand, and I've read the memorandum of understanding, and everything looked in order, and I know OSPCD blessed it and said they reviewed it in detail with regard to what you're proposing and that it complies with all the density and all the components to satisfy the IZ, but can you just speak briefly to that? Who the agent's going to be to run the lottery and the marketing and some of those things? Yeah,
So we would be the property owners from now in perpetuity, basically, of the units. Well, actually, once we sell them, they will be the owners of the actual units will be the owner. But the property manager is Maloney Properties. They work on many properties throughout Massachusetts, specifically affordable housing. So they have they specialize in this work. They are a property manager on all of our properties in Boston and in Quincy. So we are moving forward with them as the lottery, through the lottery process and through the selling of the units, and then also through the property management. Although if, there will be a primary condo board, and on that, they at any point could, there's rules obviously guiding the property manager and whether or not they will stay the property manager. So if the primary condo board decided to not keep that property manager for some reason, that is something that could happen. But that hasn't happened on any of our, we have a homeownership development in Chinatown in Boston, and they manage that property, and they've been managing it for 6 years or 8 years now.
But I would imagine that any type of change, as you're suggesting, wouldn't happen until all the units are sold.
No, of course not. So they would be, and we stay on usually, I don't know if the city of Malden requires this, but in the city of Boston, for example, we are part of the primary condo for up to 3 years in order to make sure that everything is stable and working well. And so, but the property manager would likely have that same scenario where they would be on for at least 3 years. And then if for some reason the owners decided they wanted to change, then they could. But they would be on they're on right now, they manage the property right now, and they would continue to be on until until they were not. But yes, throughout the whole process.
Okay. Now, with regard to the guaranteeing, or can you describe a little bit how you intend to keep these units affordable in perpetuity?
So we can only keep them affordable to the restrictions that are given to us by the funders. So this is actually a new change, and I don't know if OSPCD wants to speak to this, but Commonwealth Builders as a funder says that the units must be affordable for 15 years. So meaning like the owner has to live in the unit for 15 years before they can sell it at market rate. And that's a restriction that they put on the units. But I know that they're working, there's work going on with the city right now. Is it staying 15 years? Sorry, I know that there's ongoing conversations about this, so I don't mean to shift it to you, Alex. I apologize.
That's all right. Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Do you want me to state my name?
Yes, please.
Alex Pratt, Director of the Office of Strategic Planning and Community Development, 26 Hilton Street, Malden. So the Commonwealth Builder Program sets a maximum affordability period of 15 years. Most of our other affordable programs have a minimum of 15 years, which means when you pair the two together, and as Muge said, Commonwealth Builder is the only statewide program for affordable home ownership in Massachusetts. So if you want to build affordable home ownership, you're going through them. That sets it, doesn't give you any room. If 15 is the minimum for some and the max for others, it's 15. I don't know that, there have been some conversations at the state level about whether or not that's the right number and the right approach, but I don't anticipate that changing anytime soon.
So what you're saying is that this Commonwealth Builders is got a ceiling of 15 years, and then after that, it could flip into market rate?
Yes, they do. And the designers of that program have their own reasons for doing it that way, which is a different intent for some other affordable housing programs we have, but that's why.
Is Commonwealth Builders quasi-government?
It's mass housing, so it's run by mass housing, which is quasi-public. All the funds for Commonwealth Builder are state funds. First, I believe, and don't quote me on this, but it was state ARPA funding initially, and the governor's housing bond bill that was adopted last year also awarded funds to that program. The other change that recently happened with Commonwealth Builder is it used to be a rolling application. I think it was just this week they said, this is a really popular program, we're now going to have an application cycle. So in the same way that 213 Main Street has been waiting in line for the funds on the rental side, we're hopeful we don't have as long a wait on this one because we've been, they've known this project was coming, but there is more competition for these funds at the state level for both the rental and now the home ownership funds as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, go ahead, Michelle.
Diane does too. So take Diane first.
This might be a question for the gentleman that just left. The maximum of 15 years before they can sell for market rate, does that mean one person has to live there for 15 years, or can that person sell it to another affordable person?
If the owner in the first 15 years wants to sell it to another household, they can, but it has to be at the affordable sale
okay.
price.
All right,
And
I
there's
thought
a
they had-
formula and a calculation for that. So I would say if you had a major life change in year 5, you might consider that. If you're at year 14, you're going to wait it out and then sell at the unrestricted sale
Does the
price.
15 years start again, or is it,
No.
okay, so if the 5, 5, 5, and once they reach, the person who comes in at the last can sell it for market rate?
Yes, and I will say that the city has the option of, at that year 15, of reinvesting in the property and resubsidizing it for another 15 years, which allows, that possibility has allowed some of these units to get on the state housing inventory. Mass Housing and the state that runs the SHI, the Subsidized Housing Inventory, did not talk to each other about their 2 different programs and how they meet, so there was some figuring that out on the WIN project. Was one example of a project where this got complicated. They were able to figure it out, but it was tricky. I don't know that that any city has, without additional state resources, 15 years from now will be able to do that, but it's a possibility that could happen.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Alex, sorry.
I'll stay
but
up here.
Something you said that just prompted a question. I read in preparation for tonight, I think it was in the memorandum of understanding, that there's a right of first offer for someone selling their unit. Would that expire in 15 years?
I believe so, assuming that the city does at no point exercises that option. I believe that's the case.
Yeah, no, because I guess what I'm asking for is after 15 years, okay, we're in year 16, do they have to come to the city for the right of first offer? Or after 15 years, are they now in an open market?
My understanding is that it's at 15 years, so in 16 it's just market. But I haven't seen the language on it, so that could in fact be in the fine print somewhere. But I think it's safer to assume that if the city were not to act in, at year 15, that year 16, it's like any other unrestricted home in the city.
Okay, thank you. Michelle, you had something? Oh, wait, Ken Antonucci?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Just curious, do the units have to be owner occupied?
You said you'd have to be owner occupied?
Owner occupied, right?
Yes.
And they have to be owner occupied, they can't
Yes.
purchase them and rent them out?
Yeah, that's one of the restrictions in the affordable housing covenant.
Thank you.
Okay, Michelle?
Just I had a couple related questions. So these units might not qualify as affordable housing units, capital A, capital H, capital U? Is that what you're?
They will. It's the marriage between the state's subsidized housing inventory and Mass Housing's Commonwealth Builder Program was, I'll say, a little clunky. We were able to figure that out with the WIN project at Overlook Ridge, but that was the first time that those 2 agencies had to come to terms with fitting those 2 puzzle pieces together. We believe that we will be able to satisfy that here if passes pro law.
So they need to give you permission, each project, every time there's a project, they need to, I do recall, and you're saying when, that's the Overlook Ridge project where there were proposed home ownership units, and the same question came up. According to our ordinance, to be considered affordable housing, they have to be eligible to be listed
Yes,
on the state,
yes, and they
in our state inventory. So we have to get to count those, if you will. And I know there was a conversation, but so each time you do a project, you have to go back and get that, so that they haven't made a ruling or a regulation. I mean, my concern is that these are being presented as affordable housing units, but in fact, they may not be.
Well, let me be clear. These units are affordable units and will be rented, sold at affordable rents to low and moderate income buyers as described. The question is whether or not they will be on the subsidized housing inventory. And everything that we learned from the Overlook Ridge project indicates that they will in fact be. Unfortunately, the state's program, they don't issue a clear ruling and say, this is how we will treat it every single time. But based on what we went through with Overlook, we believe that these units will be on the SHI. I will also note here that that applies to the units that are at 80% AMI, and the units that are above that would not be on the subsidized housing inventory, although they are still affordable to people at those income levels.
Okay, I was going to ask about that. So yeah, when I said they may not actually be affordable housing units, I mean as defined by our ordinance, they may not be. So is that correct, that only 15% of these are technically going to satisfy that? Because we ran into the same thing at the Overlook project. They were all called affordable housing, but only 15% were required to be at that income threshold. How is this broken up in this project?
80% and 100% breakdown? They're all? So 100% of the units are at 80% AMI. So excuse me, I misspoke
Okay,
earlier.
so 100% are at the threshold to be.
That would be eligible, yes.
To meet our definition, okay.
Yes.
And so just back to the 15 years, so after 15 years, whoever owns the unit can sell it for market rate
Yes,
at this time?
yes.
Okay,
That's the way the program is currently set up with the state's funding system.
okay. So what is that, how does that change the project? Or, for example, the parking, you're coming in using the affordable housing parking requirement, the incentive, the parking adjustment, as opposed to the parking one per bedroom, which is what market rate multifamily would require. This special permit, because they're being proposed as affordable housing and meet the definition, you're able to use the parking adjustment, and it's one per unit. So how does that work then?
The units that we're building are affordable units, and it's possible that without further subsidy in years 16 and on that they might not be, but you know, these are affordable units. It is a policy question that the state needs to wrestle with, and we have encouraged them to wrestle with that, what happens in years 16, you know, and beyond. Usually for an affordable housing project, you'd see a restriction for maybe around 30 years. So there's always the possibility that this, you know, they will be built as affordable, and then at some point in the future, usually not as early as 15 years, but maybe it's 30, maybe it's 45, they could then become market. But that hasn't, to my knowledge, changed how we've treated the project as it presents itself today. Obviously, our hope is to maintain affordability as long as possible, and we've shared that with Mass Housing. I think, you know, if you know, there are different opinions from the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, which is the fully state agency, and Mass Housing. I think there are places where they disagree on this topic. We've weighed in. I know ACDC has in the past weighed in, and I think it's being played out at higher levels of housing policy than Muge and I are privy to.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean how does it affect today. I'm saying in the future, you know, part of the parking adjustment that's in our ordinance is because the argument is, you know, the targeted household typically doesn't have cars, right? So now, you know, that's not necessarily the case. So if a unit is no longer an affordable housing unit and it's one of the 3 bedrooms, how do we reconcile that they are only required to have the parking that's for affordable housing? Is there any, and my other question, and maybe we can get to when we get to the conditions, but one of the recommended conditions, and this was, is that they all are home ownership affordable housing units, but they possibly might not be. Is that correct? At some point, you could potentially be in violation of that condition if they're not affordable housing, right? So are you not agreeing to that?
I'm not sure I'm understanding. I can speak to
Yeah.
the first point.
If they become, if they're no longer affordable housing units. So the parking is technically, they require more parking, but also they're no longer affordable housing units. So if this special permit is,
I don't bel-
predicated
yeah.
on.
I don't
yeah.
believe that the inclusionary zoning says that the parking benefit for the affordable units only applies for the length of the affordability period. Most projects that we see today have a limited affordability period, and then often there's an opportunity to re-subsidize in the future. Often that happens, sometimes it doesn't. That usually has to do with what state and federal funding is around at the time, and who knows what's going to be happening 15 or 20 years from now. But I would also note that one of the reasons that there is a parking benefit for the affordable units, it is, as you said, Michelle, that there are tends to be lower parking rates among low and moderate income households than the general population. But it's also because it is in the mayor and the city council said, we want to make it easier to build affordable housing, and this is one of the ways that we can do that. And those two are both reasons for that. So I would, I'm not aware of any other project where we have said, in the future when this affordability restriction may be lifted, we're going to have to go back and revisit the parking issue, or we're going to expect, some other benefits or bonuses to change or be redacted. So I don't know that would be a fair precedent here. I also, I want to say that both ACDC and the city want to extend this affordability period as long as we can. The sole state funder, without whom there would be no affordable units, believes in this approach of 15 years. So we're continuing to navigate that and do our best with it, but it's still a moving target, if you will.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I'm just saying this is the first 100% home ownership affordable that we've seen. The Overlook Ridge, they complied with the regular zoning. They didn't need the parking adjustment. So, and then the 213 that you did 100% Main Street, or the 204, it was, you could guarantee that they were going to remain affordable because you were going to own it. So you could make that assertion that we will maintain them. And I don't know what the answer is. I'm just curious if the special permit says they're all affordable housing with capital AHU, they all meet the definition, and in 15 years, they potentially don't. You're in violation of the special permit. So I'm saying, are you accepting of this condition, or we can get to that when we discuss? I don't want to keep up.
Just keep moving on. Okay, Stephanie Stone.
Oh, thank you. I have questions about the inclusionary plan and parking. So I was curious about the lottery, how that works, and if there is any preference or could be preference for people who are residents of Malden now.
There is a preference. I believe, I can't remember the exact percentage. There's a 70% preference for local Malden residents. That is that's the amount that we can go up to for that.
If we could go higher, we would.
And the lottery really is just that people can, if they are eligible, you just pick.
So so you would submit, so the Maloney runs the lottery for this process, but basically you would have to be eligible for the unit, so you'd have to meet a certain income threshold. In this case, it's 80% AMI, or area median income. And so you would be an applicant to the process, and then they would run the process of selecting. But they organize it based on, so 70%, for example, would be the first kind of tier of like review. So they have like a tiered review, which comes out I don't know if it's the same, we have like a selection plan, which we have to produce and has to be approved by the funder, so by the state. So that's paperwork that we would just create, and it basically just makes sure you're not violating fair housing in the whole process.
Okay, thank you. On the parking, and speaking of Overlook Ridge, I remember, when we were discussing that property, there still is a parking problem there, even though they comply with the, requirements for non-inclusionary parking. There does seem to be, guest parking issues, towing and things, and I know that's bigger than this. And I am curious, if you have any concerns about capacity for guest parking and like what the parking situation is on the street around the property, since I don't think Bryant Street doesn't have street parking, but the side streets do?
So I think part of our traffic impact study addresses the parking situation and basically just the management of that. So the 1-to-1 +1, we're providing an extra parking space that we're able to provide on site based on the zoning is what we're, doing. I think like anyone who visits anybody's home who doesn't have a driveway, who has to park on the sidewalk, similarly, as a guest, you would have to do the same to find local street parking, which is public parking. That's the, I could ask if you found anything specific parking related in your study that is of concern.
And if I can remind everyone to speak into the microphone,
Sorry.
so it's hard to hear when people are standing away from it.
Yeah, what I'll say about the parking is, in terms of, as I said when I was up here before, the on-street parking, we are removing potentially 3 spaces for the site distance. But in the closure of curb cuts to the site, we're adding back in, I believe, 4 spaces. So we're adding 1 additional space on the streets for people to park in. It is common for sites like this to require guests to park on local streets if they can find parking. But I will also say, in my experience, sites like this in this type of neighborhood, they don't require 1-to-1 parking. So I think in the end, you'll probably be overparked, and there won't be all those space being utilized by people that live there. And that would allow for guests and stuff like delivery people to come in and park. So we didn't see an issue with it. We thought the site was properly parked with the 36 spaces, I believe. Yep, the 36 spaces. And with the additional of the 1 street parking space, it's an additional benefit to the neighborhood, so.
Oh, can I ask you, maybe you would also be helpful, with the decision to close the Newton Street and open Grape Street, and I think Grape Street looks like it's a one-way?
Correct.
And the other one is two-way, was that deliberate in terms of safety? Like you would rather have a one-way for an entrance and exit to a parking?
Yeah, so we didn't make the decision on the parking ourselves, but it is generally nice to have the one-way circulation through the parking site. It makes it easier for pedestrians getting through, from a further parking space over to the building. So it reduces the curb cut widths. If you had 2 full access curb cuts, you'd be taking up twice as much space. We'd be taking away a parking space instead of adding one. But once again, we weren't on the decision-making end of that, so I don't know if they would like to speak more.
He's absolutely right. I mean, it's just trying to keep it more pedestrian scaled. They're all gonna be familiar, residents and can navigate that, know what their parking is, and not have to deal with wide drive lanes.
And I was just on a non-parking note, I was wondering about, we've talked about in here, some larger buildings have, the HVAC system can be quite loud, and making sure that it, is somehow, there's a barrier for the neighborhood residents.
HVAC noise is what you're talking about?
Yes.
Yes, well, that system hasn't fully been designed yet. I mean, we will be designing the buildings to be fully compliant with the energy code. So all electric, heat pumps, and we often run into kind of acoustic concerns, roof-mounted equipment. I mean, we're not showing a lot of, or any mechanicals on the ground. So it would be roof-mounted, and whether they're enclosed with an acoustic surround, I mean, that's all something to be determined when the actual equipment is defined.
Okay. And sorry, one more thing. Oh, did you want to follow up on the acoustic?
No,
Oh.
just asking if you're ready, because
Yeah, just
Diane wants to
really
speak.
quickly. So the letter from the commission, the historical commission, is in March, and it says, provide modified plans. So in terms of us, approving this and saying, in accordance with the commission's letter in March, I'm curious if they actually do have the modified plans and said that these are okay, and we would say the updated, version of that is what they approved?
These are the modified plans. There was a different design that they had originally saw, and that is, I don't know if you guys share those materials, but they have in the packet in which we have the presentation of the original design and then the modified design. And this is the one that.
Miss, could you speak in the
Oh,
mic, please?
I'm so sorry, I'm sorry. I'll repeat myself. The commission's modified design is this one. The one that they'd seen before is not on the screen. We can send that rendering over if that's something that is needed, but I know that the Historic Commission has copies of the former design.
Yeah, I just want to make sure for our
Oh, yeah.
purposes, like, that, if there needs to be documentation that they saw the modified plans and are okay, or something like that.
I think the last time we met with them was in April, which was like physically met in person. I believe it was April or May. I can't recall the exact date. I think April. But that's when we presented these drawings. So there should be I guess there is an update, or should be an update that states that they had looked at these and that they voted, I believe they voted on continuing for us to come to them and just continue to coordinate with them.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Especially on color palette, for example. They weren't necessarily super excited about the green. We were just showing them a color, and we're going to work through that. That is not defined right now.
As well as, sorry, if I could just add, as well as the text that could be in the interpretive signs that would be on that parklet or that end of the site.
Thank
You
you,
all set?
I'm good.
Thank you. Diane Chuha.
I just have a question. I noticed that there's, 2 handicap parking spaces. Are there going to be any units that are going to be handicap accessible? Yep.
Yeah,
Okay,
5% of the units need to be ADA accessible.
Wonderful.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Ken Antonucci.
Okay, yeah, so going back to the Historic Commission, some of their requests here. Now, you're saying the drawings that we actually have with us and what you're presenting are the ones that they've seen these and they're okay
Correct.
with these, but you're gonna keep working with them?
Correct.
Okay, because, again, with the renderings, I mean, the type of brick and everything that's in the rendering doesn't really look like it matches what's on the existing structure.
Correct. So what we did was we brought brick samples to talk about, and they were talking about clinker brick at first, which is this kind of weird jagged.
Plus, they don't exist anymore.
They don't make
Yeah,
them
no.
anymore, no. And so we talked a little bit about that, and we asked them what was more important. Was it the color? Was it the texture, like making it kind of more distressed looking, et cetera? And they had said, I believe that they liked both aspects of that. So we're finding more brick samples to show them. This is just the rendering of an image.
Yeah, okay, because it's definitely, because they're like a water-struck brick
Correct,
with clinkers in them, and they stopped making those in the 60s, but these look
Yeah,
like
yep.
just regular, straight, commercial-looking brick like you'd see on the building outside. And also just the extent of it. I mean, it's pretty much just a first-level couple of panels, really, with the masonry, whereas on the existing building, it was full height, so I don't know if there's any consideration, say, on that left part of the building where you have the vertical windows of extending the brickwork up. It would probably accentuate those long vertical windows as well, because this just seems like it's just a small portion of the facade on the bottom. I mean, I know it's just, just how it's designed right now, but, we are gonna be approving based on these drawings. Right.
Well, these plans, yes.
These plans, yeah. Yeah, so that's just my concern, that we just, make sure we include as much of what the Historic Commission is asking for in the design here. So, all right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Any other questions for the petitioner? Okay, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to note what the petitioner is saying is correct. These renderings were presented to the Historical Commission back in April. They did indicate their support. I'm reading right now from the minutes. I'm the clerk to the commission, but I'm reading from the minutes saying that they reviewed their determinations. They indicated support of the proposed modified plan and proposed current design, shown on page 8 of the PowerPoint presentation, which I just looked at, is the same presentation. At least this particular page is the same. and agree that the applicant continue with the plan to work toward compliance with condition of the commission's decision dated March 20, 2025, which you have a copy of in the package. What I will, when we get to that point, recommend, one of the conditions that recommended for the special permit would be compliance with the determination of the Historical Commission. But I would also add, or propose to add, that the exterior may be subject to modification to comply. Just in case there are further changes, it is correct what you're saying, these would be the plans you approve, and if there's any further modification that needs to happen to comply with the Historical Commission decision, we want to have that opportunity for the petitioner, not have to have them come back and forth several times. So I can add some additional language into that. Also, I think I was just going to mention the archway was another one of the features that is listed in that decision that's shown on the plan, either preserving that existing or replicating it. So I just wanted to note that since those couple questions have come up. And we can talk about screening the rooftop equipment, possibly considering a condition about that when we get to that point. So that's it, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have any other questions? Is there anything else you'd like to add to your presentation?
No, we're just thankful to present and excited about the opportunity to keep coordinating with everyone and working on this project.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'm going to disconnect this if that's okay.
Alex, did you have something?
Yes, thank you. My colleague reminded me that the city solicitor reviewed the language regarding the affordable housing units and the SHI requirements, and did author an opinion stating that the Commonwealth Builder units would be eligible and qualify under our ordinance to kind of satisfy that requirement.
Okay.
Which I'm happy to share with Michelle and through her to the committee as well. So wanted to add that.
Thank you. Okay, at this point in time, I'd like to entertain anyone that would like to speak in favor of the petition. Anyone to speak in favor? And I remind you all, please speak into the microphone, name and address for the record, and sign the clipboard. So is there anyone who'd like to speak in favor? Diane, do you have anything to read in favor?
Yes, I do.
Give me a second, I'll activate your mic. Okay, go ahead, thank you.
Letter dated June 18th, 2025. Dear Chair Iovan and members of the Malden Planning Board, I write you today to express my full support for Asian Community Development Corporation's inclusionary zoning special permit application to construct 35 affordable homeownership units at 245 Bryant Street. Sitting on the former site of the congregation Agudas Akim Israel, this 100% affordable housing project is yet another example of the city's efforts to combat the ongoing housing crisis by creating affordable home ownership opportunities for our low-income residents. When the congregation first indicated to the city their intent to downsize to better accommodate their current membership, we explored all viable options for the congregation to make a sale that upholds the values of their mission. Following conversations with Councilor Simonelli and the City Housing ARPA Subcommittee, we view this as an opportunity to develop affordable housing units on the site. Thanks to the benevolence of the congregation, we were able to work with Asian Community Development Corporation, also known as ACDC, by using housing ARPA funds towards acquisition of the property. As exhibited during the planning and permitting processes, ACDC has proven to be an invaluable partner to the city. Through their work to develop 20 affordable rental units on the site of the former Salvation Army at 213 Main Street, and with their good faith efforts to ensure this project comes to fruition, ACDC has demonstrated their desire to expand their reach and further ingrain themselves as a staple within our community. Thank you for your consideration of this application, and I urge you to grant an exclusionary zoning special permit to ensure ACDC is able to deliver on developing 35 affordable home ownership units for Malden residents. Sincerely, Gary Christensen, Mayor, City of Malden. Letter dated June 17th, 2025. Dear Chair Iovan and members of the Malden Planning Board, I write you today in full support of Asian Community Development Corporation in their efforts to receive their inclusionary zoning special permit to construct 35 affordable home ownership units on the former site of the Congregation Agudas Akim Ezrath Israel on Bryant Street. Earlier last year, I was approached by members of the congregation with their plans and intent to downsize to a property that better fits the needs of their community membership. From there, I was proud to partner with Mayor Christensen and the Housing ARPA Subcommittee to work with Asian Community Development Corporation, simply known as ACDC, on a city-funded acquisition of the property to construct 35 affordable homeownership units on the site. While not originating in Malden, ACDC has demonstrated a passion and a desire through its extensive work in the city, including plans to develop 20 affordable housing units for the site of the former Salvation Army at 213 Main Street, and with this project to invest in our community and to further deepen their roots in Malden. This project will be a welcome addition to Ward 7, with the project creating affordable home ownership opportunities for low-income residents who want to remain within our community and fully realize the American dream to the fullest. I commend the congregation for not only being a staple in Ward 7 for decades, but for their selflessness and humanity as an institution and continuing to deliver for Malden residents. Their roots as a congregation extend far beyond the building they occupy. It is without a doubt that they will continue to be a steward within our community for generations to come. I urge you to grant an exclusionary zoning permit for the project to streamline the process for ACDC in developing affordable homeownership units for Malden residents. Thank you for your consideration of this application. Sincerely, Chris Seminelli, City Councilor, Ward 7.
Thank you, Diane. Is that all you have in favor?
Yes, I do. That's it.
And last call, is there anyone that would like to speak in favor? Seeing and hearing none, declare that part of the hearing closed. Is there anyone that would like to speak in opposition to this petition? If you can come up to the microphone, sir, speak into the microphone, name and residential address, and sign the clipboard, please.
My name is William Cook, 54 Newton Street, Malden, Mass. I'm a direct abutter to this, and as I see this project now, I'm urging you not to let this permit, to go forward. Not that it shouldn't go forward at all, but as I see it, the whole project is incomplete. As it is right now, there is a lot of my neighbors couldn't attend tonight. There was a little miscommunication about the notification. Some didn't get it. Others weren't able to make it. The building as it stands, I believe it's going to be detrimental to our abutters' rights in very many ways. We're not opposed to building and having multiple units there. The size and the configuration seems to be an issue. And at this time, like I said, I think that more information is needed. I think updated plans are needed, more information on the HVAC systems, the trash systems, and the traffic survey. I do have an issue with that. I live here, and traffic is horrendous in this area. And they just seem to mention Bryant Street for some reason. But I live on Newton Street. In the past year, we've had some really critical accidents come from that street. As far as parking, there was barely any parking on that street. When people park on both sides, fire apparatus can't get up the street. So parking is most definitely going to be an issue in the area. So that's all I can say for now. I'm just urging you not to pass this at this point. I'm not saying not to ever pass it, but I think there's a lot that needs to be done. We were also promised meetings and, things to go in so we could have input on the design of the building. That never happened. So thank you for listening to me, and I appreciate, and I hope to make the right decision.
Thank you, sir.
Do you want me to sign in?
What's that? Yeah, sir, did you sign the clipboard? No. Thank you. Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in opposition? Anyone else speak in opposition? Diane, do you have anything to read in opposition?
I do not.
Thank you. So seeing no one else that would like to speak in opposition.
Mr. Chair, I do want to make one note, if I could. I did receive an email I did ask them to provide their names and address for the record. They did not, so they're just saying 3 homeowners on Hazelwood Street. So I'm just letting you know, there was an email received, but they didn't get back to me with the information. So, I don't know if you want to count that or you don't.
So you have a copy of this email?
I have the
Okay,
email.
you can put it in the record?
I can. I
Okay.
have the person who sent the email and.
Okay, if you want to come up and speak in opposition,
Give your name and address,
you
yes.
name and address for the record.
3 resident homeowners at 2431.
What's your name and address, sir?
24 Hazelwood Street, 31 Hazelwood Street, and
And what's your name, sir?
what number? 27. And 27. My name is Charles Connors,
Charles Connors, and you
and
are
I
which one?
sent that email. Yes.
And which address are you?
24 Hazelwood.
24 Hazelwood, okay.
My neighbor Jose is at the other address, and Jack Belanger, who could not attend today, is at 31 Hazelwood Street.
Okay.
And all 3 of us object, based upon what I've heard in the hearing.
So you're in opposition to this?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak in opposition? No one else in opposition? Okay, declare that part of the hearing closed. Michelle, can you take us through your staff report, please?
Yes, I also do want to note, we won't read this into the record, but another correspondence we do have is, and I mentioned it earlier, is the city's peer review report. You have a copy of that, and the city peer reviewer is here if you have questions about that. Just give me a second, I want to get to that. That is the letter dated June 12th, 2025, and it is from Rebecca Halzak and William Pale of BSC Group. So you've heard about the property, the location. I've given you the breakdown here, which is the information that was provided on the plans in terms of how many 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, total of 35 units, a total of 72 bedrooms. There are also some amenities included, which you can see on the plans, a lobby, package room. We heard about the bike storage room. There are also individual storage rooms, storage rooms on each floor with individual spaces for the unit, so a total of 35 individual spaces or slash units in 3 rooms. There are also mechanical rooms proposed on the first floor, water, electrical, janitor. So not the building mechanicals that we heard about will be proposed to be sited on the rooftop. These are the plans that were presented here. I won't read them. And I forgot to say that I'm reading from the planning report and recommendation dated June 25th, 2025. I will not read it verbatim into the record. It's incorporated herein by reference into the record. The subject property is located in the Residence A zoning district. The religious facility use is allowed by right in this district. The proposed multifamily dwelling use up to 3 stories is prohibited in this zoning district. However, it may be allowed by special permit as a residential conversion of a pre-existing non-conforming property. Direct abutters to the west are 3-family dwellings and a single-family dwelling to the north. On the other side of Newton Street, single and 2-family dwellings to the south. On the other side of Grape Street, multifamily dwelling with 4 stories and 39 units. And to the north and east, on the other side of Bryant Street, multifamily dwellings with 3 stories and 117 units. Surrounding uses are residential, mostly single and 2-family dwellings, several 3-family dwellings, and multifamily dwellings, including housing operated by the Malden Housing Authority and for seniors and disabled, and supportive housing for families operated by Housing Families, and also nearby is Lincoln Commons Park. In terms of dimensional controls, the existing building on the property occupied for religious facility use predates and violates current dimensional controls for front yard setback, rear yard setback, building coverage. It's considered pre-existing non-conforming. The proposal reduces the front yard setback violation. It eliminates the rear yard setback violation and building coverage violations. The proposal complies with all dimensional controls for multifamily dwelling up to 3 stories, except front yard setback and density. And that includes the density bonus provisions of the inclusionary zoning ordinance. So briefly, we'll just discuss this. So under the zoning, the lot this size, under zoning requirements for multifamily dwellings, could support 29 units. That's based on 1,500 square feet of lot area per unit. There is a density bonus for inclusionary zoning, whereby 1 additional unit per each required affordable housing unit will be allowed. So there are 5 density bonus units in this proposal. So 5 affordable housing units are required, and so they will get the density bonus for the 5 units. So that brings you up to the 34 units, so the 29 units that are allowed under the density requirements for the multifamily dwelling, the 5 density bonus units under the IZ. Proposed are 35, so the one of the proposed 35 units does require relief. This board may grant relief for new or increased nonconformities under the special permit. This would be relief that you would need to grant to allow that 35th unit. In terms of open space, the proposal does provide more than the required amount of open space. What's required is 8,750 square feet. Approximately 11,825 square feet is provided. That's only looking at what's located in the rear yard and eastern side yard, which are the areas that are shaded green on the plan. And those, as the petitioner mentioned, those particular areas comply with the usable open space requirements. So all of the different requirements, including dimensional requirements. In addition to that above referenced open spaces the chair asked about, there was also open space proposed in the front and western side yard. Those areas do not comply with the dimensional requirements for usable open space. So it's not that it's not open space, it just doesn't comply with all the criteria to be counted towards the technical open space requirement. Parking requirements, so the most recent religious facility use of the building requires 269 spaces under current requirements. There are approximately 46 spaces on site. The use predates the current zoning ordinance. It is considered pre-existing non-conforming. It doesn't comply with the parking requirements. In terms of the proposed use for the proposed multifamily dwelling with 35 affordable housing units, 35 spaces would be required. That would be 1 per affordable housing unit. The proposal is to provide 36 spaces. The layout is conforming of the proposed new parking area in terms of width of aisles, size of parking spaces. They are proposing the one-way circulation pattern we heard about. There is a proposal to close the 2 existing curb cuts on Grape Street and 1 curb cut on Newton Street. Those are the curb cuts that currently provide access to existing parking areas. The proposal also includes installing 2 new curb cuts on Grape Street, 1 to provide one-way access and 1 to provide one-way egress. Bicycle parking, the proposal requires parking for 4 bicycles. They are proposing a bicycle room inside for 11 bicycles and a bicycle rack outside at the front of the building for 9. So they're proposing parking for 20 bikes. Landscaping, the proposal complies with the landscaping requirements, the snow storage requirements, screening requirements, as I think the chair mentioned. The plans do depict only a chain link fence along the southern property line abutting 3 of the residences. So the recommendation is that they do install privacy fencing. The other option would be to install vinyl slats in the chain link fencing. The requirement is that the abutting residential uses be screened from the multifamily parking area. That could be by foliage or fencing. And again, those are the 3 properties, 4143 Newton, 37 Newton, and 3032 Grape Street that are required to be screened. Trash, as we briefly talked about, the proposed waste recycling area is located in the proposed parking lot. It is approximately 2 feet from the property line on Grape Street, so it doesn't comply with siting requirements, which again prohibits siting within 20 feet of the property line. It does comply with the screening requirements. In terms of traffic impact, the proposal did require a traffic impact study per your rules and procedures. The petitioner submitted a traffic impact study, and the city peer reviewed it. That is, again, that report I'm referencing dated June 12th, 2025. The peer from BSC Group, the peer review recommends the following traffic and safety mitigation for the project developer. 1, to install the proposed curb cuts, parking geometry, and signage for proposed one-way circulation. throughout the parking lot. 2, to implement the transportation demand management measures, including providing a welcome packet to residents and employees with information regarding transportation services, post public transportation schedules in centralized location, and provide information regarding pedestrian and bicycle facilities and post in a centralized location. 3, third recommendation is to improve sight lines near the site driveway on Grape Street, to coordinate with the city to determine feasibility of removing 3 car lanes and or limiting on-street parking on Grape Street. On that note, I do also want to note that I had a follow-up email from the city peer reviewer, and that's dated June 25th, 2025. The petitioner contacted the city engineer and submitted, as they mentioned, they were in touch with the city engineer. They submitted a sketch showing which parking spaces would be lost because of the new curb cuts and which parking spaces would be gained. Specifically, the issue had to do with the site distance on the exit-only driveway, which is going to be on Grape Street. We heard there was also going to be parking gained on on Newton Street. So the peer reviewer did have a chance to look at the information they provided, and I just wanted to read this into the record. This is the email dated June 25th, 2025 from William Pale of BSC Group. It reads, line of sight will no longer be an issue along Newton Street as any access from the site is being removed. With regard to Grape Street, since the street is one directional flow to Bryant Street, all exits from the site will be turning left onto Grape Street to Bryant. Thus, the driver will be able to see to their right before continuing onto Grape Street, even with a parked vehicle. So he clarified that he thought their current proposal that they recently submitted to the city engineer would satisfy that. That being said, the recommendation was to improve sight lines near the site drive on Grape Street, coordinate with the city to determine feasibility of removing 3 car lanes and or limiting on-street parking on Grape Street. To make sure that I'm carrying that through as a condition, a recommended condition, just to make sure that everything is in order and it does get completed. Again, the plans that they submitted didn't show that. This new, the feedback they provided to the city engineer did show that, but that's not, formally before you. I just want to make sure that gets addressed. 4, provide a report. This is the 4th recommendation of the peer review. Provide report with discussion of potential contributing factors to high prevalence of crashes at Eastern Ave and Bryant Street, including vulnerable user crashes, pedestrians, and cyclists. Include specific safety measures to be implemented as part of the project, city peer review of report, and proposed safety measures. We've heard we had a little brief discussion of that. When we get to this point, you could simply remove the phrase as implemented as part of the project. So you could they could provide the discussion of specific safety measures without requiring the implementation. And then the 5th recommendation was to optimize existing traffic signal at Eastern Ave and Bryant Street, coordinate with the city to modify the signal timing at this intersection. As I mentioned earlier, the city engineer informed me that there is a proposal to redo that intersection possibly in the time period 2029 to 2031, so that's several years out. I would recommend that, and I did keep this condition in, or will recommend keeping that in, so perhaps something can be done in the meantime before the signal, if that intersection ever gets redone, before it gets upgraded. So they can possibly address some of the issue now. In terms of inclusionary zoning, this proposal does require an inclusionary development because it increases, there's a net increase of 8 or more units. So highlights of the proposal's compliance with the requirements. So there's a mandatory provision of affordable housing units. So the proposal is to provide 35 housing units, affordable housing units. That exceeds the requirement to provide a minimum of 15% of the total dwelling units. Excluding units allowed under the density bonus must be affordable housing units. So 29 units times 15% is 4.35 affordable housing units are required. The ordinance provides for an alternative method of compliance, so fractional units may be rounded up, In this case, the developer does elect to round up the required number, 4.35, to provide one additional affordable housing unit for the fractional unit. So thus required to provide 5 affordable housing units. There is a density bonus incentive, which we talked about before. So under the proposal, they are using this bonus, this incentive, to construct 5 additional units. So 1 for every required affordable housing units, regardless of the density requirement of the underlying zoning. 4, there's a parking adjustment incentive. The proposal uses the incentive to adjust the parking from 1 space per bedroom to 1 space per affordable housing unit. And then finally, submission requirements. There's a memorandum of understanding that was executed by the developer and city. That is considered sufficient documentation of future compliance regarding the lottery plan, marketing plan, and draft legal instruments for preservation of affordability. For more information, you can see the memorandum, which is a compliance letter dated May 28th from Ben Gately, Housing Program Coordinator, City of Malden, Office of Strategic Planning and Community Development. That just indicates they've reviewed all the affordable housing requirements, and they believe this is their opinion or their statement to you that they are in compliance with all the provisions of the ordinance. I've highlighted a few of those provisions here, but there are more details in that. The memorandum of understanding takes care of those 3 requirements that aren't being met right now. They're committing to meet them in the future. In terms of the building, in terms of your consideration of the Historical Commission determination, the building, the property is what's considered a preferably preserved building site. So that means it's the site of a building that was determined to be preferably preserved by the Malden Historical Commission pursuant to the city's demolition and alteration delay ordinance. So you have a copy of the decision of the Historical Commission dated March 20th, 2025. The notice of decision is actually dated March 26, 2025, but the decision was made on the 20th. And the commission approved the proposed demolition prior to the expiration of the delay period, subject to compliance with the conditions described in that decision. So what that means is the commission determined it was preferably preserved. They wanted the developer to the building was put into demolition delay. That's 15 months under the ordinance. So they wanted the developer to explore and work with the commission to preserve elements or parts of the building or incorporate historical elements or parts of the building. So the developer worked with the commission, revised its plans, as we heard, and presented them to the commission. And when the commission was satisfied that certain elements would be incorporated in, that is when it issued this other determination in March, releasing it for demolition prior to the expiration of the 15 months. So it was in demo delay for several months, and then it was released. So they did not have to wait the full 15 months. And so because of that determination that was made, the proposal requires compliance with another section of the ordinance, which reads, the special permit granting authority must receive and reasonably incorporate into a special permit that is granted the recommendations of the Malden Historical Commission regarding the preservation of the building, structure, or site, which may include, but is not limited to, the rehabilitation, restoration, replication, and or reuse in whole or in part of the building, structure, or site, or any historical features or elements of the property, the facade, and the exterior of the building. So you have the recommendations of the Historical Commission in that May 26, 2025 letter. That was their most recent determination. So that's why I'm recommending condition that you require compliance with that determination. And as I said before, I have some additional language to add. We don't see very few cases with this, so I think the last one we saw was on Francis Street, the residential 3-family, where they were going to renovate the building, and they were required to do it in accordance with the Historical Commission requirements and determination. So I went through that just hopefully quickly, just so to orient you as to why this was coming here. As I said, we don't see a lot of these. The Historical Commission reviews all the demolitions. However, there aren't many that are determined to be preferably preserved that would trigger this.
Okay.
Okay, so findings required to grant the special permit. So you would be rendering one decision. Well, let's say the petition is seeking three different types of special permits. Okay, so one is the special permit for the residential conversion of a non-conforming property. So the religious facility is non-conforming, not the use, but the building is, so that's a non-conforming property, and they're proposing a residential conversion. That is an option that the ordinance provides. That is, so that's the first part of the petition. The second part of the petition is the inclusionary zoning part. Because it requires the inclusionary development, so the minimum of 15% affordable, that's also triggering a special permit review. That's all the IZ or the inclusionary zoning piece. And then the final piece is because of the historical commission's determination that it was preferably preserved. So the criteria that I'm giving you here are the different criteria, although apparently I think I'm missing one of the criteria, so hold on one second. I think there's a couple of them duplicate, so maybe that's why. Hold on one second. So these are the findings that you would need to make to grant the special permit. So the first is that any increase or creation in violation of dimensional controls or parking requirements will not be more detrimental to the neighborhood. So that is one of the required findings under the residential conversion piece. I believe I have the wrong section cited, so let me just make sure that's correct. So that should actually be 1228-010D. So I just want to make sure that that is correct and updated. The second finding, that the residential use is in the interest of the common good, is, and I will just state for the record, the notice did advertise the correct sections that they were seeking a special permit under. The staff report, I don't have the correct sites in here, so I'm going to correct it as I tell you them. But it was properly advertised and noticed. The second piece is 1212-010. Okay, so that's not correct, so hold on one second. Okay, so two isn't actually a finding you would need to make. So one, that's the finding you need to make to grant the special permit for the conversion of the non-conforming property to residential. The second finding is that the proposal is in the interest of the common good. That is the finding that has to do with the historical commission determination that it's preferably preserved. So you have to receive and reasonably incorporate their recommendations, and you also would need to find the proposal is in the interest of the common good. So that's the second one. And then the third one is compliance with the requirements of the inclusionary zoning ordinance. That's section 1212-300. And those are the specific technical requirements of the inclusionary zoning. You have to find that they comply with all the requirements. There's no variance allowed of any of them, and there's no relief that you could allow. So those are the three findings you would need to make to grant the special permit. Or really the three special permits, but to grant the petition, I should say. It's a petition for three permits. One petition.
Can you provide the recommendation?
Yes, so the recommendation is prepared prior to the public hearing made, provided the board makes the required findings. To grant a special permit subject to the following conditions. 1, all development shall be as per plans except as modified by these conditions. 2, the maximum number of dwelling units is 35, the maximum number of bedrooms is 72, and as proposed, all shall be home ownership affordable housing units. I think we have to talk about that, but I'll continue on. Okay?
Yes, please.
3, prior to issuance of any occupancy permit, developer owner shall comply with all terms of the memorandum of understanding dated May 21st, 2025, regarding affordable housing units, which is incorporated herein by reference. That's the memorandum that concerns the lottery, the marketing plan, and the draft legal instruments for preservation of affordability. 4, developer owner shall implement the following traffic and safety mitigation. 1, obtain DPW commission approval to install proposed curb cuts. Install and maintain parking layout and signage for proposed one-way circulation throughout the parking lot. That's 4A. 4B is implement transportation demand management measures, including provide welcome packet to residents and employees with information regarding transportation services, post public transportation schedules in centralized location, provide information regarding pedestrian and bicycle facilities in post and centralized location. 4C is improve sight lines near site driveway on Grape Street, coordinate with city to determine feasibility of removing 3 car lanes and or limiting on-street parking on Grape Street. 4D is provide report with discussion of potential contributing factors to high prevalence of crashes at Eastern Ave and Bryant Street, including vulnerable user crashes, pedestrians and cyclists, including specific safety measures to be implemented as part of the project. Respond as necessary to city peer review of report and proposed safety measures. E, optimize signal, this is 4E, optimize signal, existing traffic signal at Eastern Ave and Bryant Street, coordinate with the city engineer to modify the signal timing at this intersection. 5, install and maintain all open space and landscaping as depicted on conceptual landscape plan. So it says open space and landscaping, so that is going to be everything in all the yard areas. It's not just what's being designated, as the chair noted, as usable open space. And I just want to make sure, so it doesn't matter how it's being called, it's all open space and landscaping. So it doesn't matter whether it complies with our requirements or it doesn't, it's all that's being shown. 6, install and maintain privacy fencing along property lines to screen parking lot from abutting residences at 4143 Newton Street, 37 Newton Street, and 30-32 Grape Street. 7, compliance with the determination of the Malden Historical Commission dated March 26, 2025, which is incorporated herein by reference. I would add exterior plans may be modified to comply with MHC determination. So if any further modification needs to be done, you will allow that through this condition. They will not have to come back to you. I will also recommend, based on what we've heard, that you include an expiration date that extends beyond the 1 year. The ordinance states that the rights authorized by special permit lapse within 1 year of granting. So that means the rights would lapse within 1 year of tonight, if you grant the special permit tonight, unless you extend it, or unless substantial construction or use has commenced. It doesn't sound like substantial construction or use is going to commence within the year based on the funding and whatnot. I could suggest June 30th, 2027. That would be
It's got to be 2 years.
another complete year. Now, if they get close to this date and they're still not, so it would read, this special permit shall expire on, for example, June 30th, 2027, unless substantial construction has commenced. What I want to just mention to you, and you want to clarify, and I think the building commissioner is here, or he was here, he might have left. I believe construction includes demolition. Okay, but that doesn't mean they've necessarily started building, okay? But that's a type of building permit. So if you want to specify construction of the building, or you don't, if it doesn't matter to you, as long as they've started the project, that's okay. For example, you may be thinking of Main Street. Main Street has not started that project. They haven't commenced construction. They haven't commenced the demolition. However, there is a State Permit Extension Act that applies to that project, so their special permit has not expired. This one will expire, unless you provide another date, so I'm throwing that out there, and then.
Yes, no, I think you should add in, extend to 6/30/2027,
Okay,
unless substantial construction has occurred.
okay, has commenced, okay, so, and that's,
Construction.
that's number 8. And then 9, I would recommend, something about the rooftop equipment, because as, I think it was Stephanie mentioned, there have been issues with that in the past on some of these, and I would specify screen rooftop equipment visually and acoustically, so it's more than just a visual screening, it's some sort of sound. Not knowing what they're proposing, I don't know what that's gonna look like, or if you would wanna know what it's gonna look like, but I would, at the very least, that's pretty general, that it be screened visually and acoustically. And, the other, I don't have language, but I wanted to just bring that back for your consideration, the issue with the parking, which I will state, I did not understand that within 15 years, these could potentially become market rate units. I think that is an issue with the parking, and I'm not sure if you want to address it or you don't. I don't know what the answer would be.
Well, before we go
Yes.
there,
Okay.
with regard to, I believe it's 4D, do we want to change that to include specific safety measures as part of the project?
Sure.
So
So-
take out to be implemented?
Okay, so delete that. The other thing is, on that note, Chair, if they're not gonna be implemented as part of this project, you may wanna take out, city peer review report of them. The idea was if they were gonna become part of the project and become incorporated into your decision, we would want the city
What do
to
you
have peer
recommend?
reviewed that.
Based on what you heard tonight, what do you recommend?
Yeah, I would recommend, that they would not need to be, well, I don't know. I don't know what I recommend. I mean, if they're gonna provide the city with the report, it would go to the city engineer, who will be overseeing the project. So I guess we don't, if it's not gonna come back to you, there's no need for the peer review, I would say, so I would take it out. So it will just end with, provide city with report with discussion of potential contributing factors. So we'll have that, and then we can use it as we're addressing that new design, or potential.
So period after factors and take the rest out?
Period after measures,
Okay, measures.
specific safety measures, period. Yeah,
So the last sentence.
right. From to be implemented on. Again, the peer review would be if you needed to have a,
Okay.
so, yes, I would take that out.
So then there's two other issues. You said something about parking?
Well, I'm just raising that because, like I said, I was not aware of that. Yeah.
This is certainly the first time I've heard that there's a maximum of 15 years. It's disappointing. The state has definitely been draconian in forcing us to do MBTA and ADUs. I don't understand why they would take the lower end of maximizing 15 instead of a minimum of 15. Where I'm struggling is, how do we hold this project accountable for something that may or may not happen 15 years from now? It could change in between then. This may be extended as affordable, which everyone, I think, hopes at the moment, to help with that housing shortfall that we have. I mean, I'm looking back 15 years from now, things are going to be only more expensive, and so it's not like affordability isn't going to be an issue 15 years from now. And then to hold them to, if and when these units ever flip into a market rate, I don't know how we hold this group who satisfies what our current requirements are, how we hold them accountable to something 15 years down the road that may or may not happen, though I recognize then if they do all flip into market rate, we got a severe parking shortage. That's not lost on me, but I just don't know how we tie the two together. Stephanie Stone had a comment.
Yeah, I'm curious about the conversation or documentation from the city solicitor regarding potentially the exclusionary parking, exception or exemption being able to stick to the project when it's first built, and that it would last, and that they could claim that legally they can keep the lower parking.
I'll let Michelle
Yeah.
speak to that.
Yeah, I don't have that opinion, and I will ask Director Pratt if he could at least give us the date so we can reference it in your minutes if there is an opinion, and if he can forward that to me. But I understood the opinion was that they can count the units that have a that have the 15-year affordability restriction will satisfy will be able to be counted as affordable housing units on the subsidized inventory, which was a similar question we got on the Overlook project when they came in and said 15 years, because they were using Commonwealth Builder 2. We didn't talk about parking on that one, though, because they satisfied all the parking. They didn't need the IZ parking. This is coming up because they're using the parking adjustment. But we can have, if you want, Chair, clarify that. I didn't think the opinion had to do with parking. I thought it had to do with counting units with the 15-year affordability restriction as affordable housing, as
That's how I
satisfying the
understood it,
ordinance, but we should
Director Pratt,
clarify
you come up
that.
and,
I don't have that opinion, so I don't know. It's the first I've heard of it.
So the question is, Director Pratt, the solicitor's opinion, is that just on the fact that for the next 15 years, we can count those in SHI inventory? Or is that also something to do with parking?
It was related to the former because it was her opinion, which I did forward a few minutes ago, Michelle. I'm sure you haven't had a chance to check your email during this conversation, which is fine. I believe it was dated November 10th, but it was sent to you. That was related specifically to the Overlook Ridge project, and I'm happy to work with her office and see if she can provide an additional opinion that would determine that, the Commonwealth Builder units satisfy that requirement per our ordinance. I imagine that they would still, because it did not relate to the parking question at all. It was related to, are these affordable housing units, and do they meet the SHI requirements of our ordinance with the Commonwealth Builder funds?
Okay. Stephanie, does that satisfy your curiosity?
Yeah, well, I think it would be helpful to understand if there is some sort of legal, guarantee, if you will, for the property owner to be able to preserve that parking amount because they built the housing when it was all affordable and it was under that parking exemption. Because to know if we could then make a restriction to say.
What specifically are you asking from the city solicitor?
Right, to say, if we had wanted to make some sort of requirement says a special permit needs to be relooked at if it's becomes non-affordable and we have to look at the parking, or if we just can't do that, if that's something that the property owner just has as their right because they built underneath the.
I'm not sure what you're asking for, so I'll let Michelle answer it.
Yeah.
I think and I don't know if the city solicitor would give this opinion, you can place any conditions you think are reasonable for reasonable use of the property. So the project you're seeing tonight is 35 affordable housing homeownership units that meet the parking as affordable housing. What we've heard, though, is that they could change and no longer be affordable housing units. So two things. One, if your special permit says they shall all be affordable housing units, that's going to be an issue because as soon as one becomes a market rate, they're no longer all affordable housing units. So that's one thing. We need to figure out if that needs to be deleted out of this. Maybe, knowing what we know, maybe we can't require that. In terms of the parking, what I was thinking, and I'm not sure how we would monitor it, is if a unit becomes market rate, maybe they would have to come back, or they would have to provide additional parking. Not necessarily this developer, they won't own it. It will be, additional parking needs to be provided. Now, who's gonna monitor that? Who's gonna monitor the sale? I don't know. I know the building commissioner, I think, has gone, so I'm not really sure how that would work. Especially, it would be different if the group were owning it, and the group could get back to us, right? The ACDC or an entity would tell us, hey, they've switched. Hey, it's no longer affordable. But that's not the case, right? That's not gonna happen, because they're all gonna be individually owned. So who's gonna track who's selling what when? I don't know. If we could come up with some sort of condition, I'm not necessarily concerned. It would be a condition on the project, but it wouldn't be a condition on this developer, because they won't be the ones in 15 years when the condition could come into play. So, I mean, otherwise, if you want to put a generic condition, you know, any time, you know, if the units are no longer affordable units, they need to seek an amendment of the special permit. So whoever it is going to have to come back. The property owner is going to have to come back. I don't know.
Condo association?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to be. Is it going to be a condo association? I guess it would be, right?
That's what they said earlier,
Oh,
that
is
there was
it?
gonna be
Okay.
some sort of housing.
Yeah. I mean, I
group.
guess it would be, anything you put on the special permit runs with the property. So it's not specific to this petitioner, you know?
Right, no,
So
no,
I just, you know, I
understand that, but
don't
that's
know
probably-
how that's gonna work.
The
you know?
condo association is the one I would think would be for the longest haul. I mean, they're gonna build and sell, be out in 3 to 5 years, is what I heard earlier when they described it. Now, then the question is, what happens after that? And again, it may or may not happen, I don't know.
And if it doesn't happen, what I would like is if there could be a condition, or what I would recommend, if it doesn't happen, then the condition's never triggered, right? If it maintains affordability, you know, forever, then there's no condition. The condition doesn't come into play, right?
Right, no, I
Right,
agree.
oh, okay,
but
that's what I'm saying,
But
yeah.
it sounds like what we're doing is we're trying to put on this petitioner something that may or may not happen 15 years from now. And I don't know if that's fair, and more importantly, I don't think it's practical. I mean, we all went by the property, walked the property. What happens when we sit there 16 years from now and say, you've got 36 parking spots, you now need 72? Where are they gonna get it from? I mean, I just don't see how that would happen.
Right, and it may not even be 72 if zoning
It
ever
could be
changes.
something worse, right?
Or could be less.
Or better, right.
There was a proposal to reduce the parking, so.
And there could be gradual selling of the condos where some are still affordable, some aren't, and so it could just
Yeah,
like keep
okay.
changing the
Could be a
numbers,
myriad
yeah,
of things, right,
yeah.
so. But okay, so Stephanie, did you know what are you asking for?
Well,
and
well, no, it is helpful, because I
Because
misheard
what it sounds like you're asking
earlier.
for more
Yeah.
information, which would mean we don't vote on this tonight, we table it
Right.
and get this information that you asked for,
Right.
if everyone else agrees with you. Why don't we do this? Why don't you take a moment and, why don't you take a moment and think about that? I see Director Pratt up here, and then we'll go to Risa Gray and Diane Chuha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is a fascinating and pertinent discussion. I think this topic will be relevant for every affordable homeownership project that tries to take advantage of inclusionary zoning, which I expect most of them will, because it is essential to most of these projects penciling out. Overlook is unusual for a number of reasons, and not our typical development project. So for any affordable homeownership project, of course, which we support, this issue will come up, because the primary funder of affordable homeownership requires that 15-year deadline, and that makes it difficult. So I think it's an important conversation for you all to have. I share your concerns about the practicality of putting a requirement on a condo association whose owners don't really exist yet. And even if we were able to track and say definitively, okay, it's year 16 or year 17 or whenever that is, and we say, okay, we believe that it's no longer compliant, well, then what? Does it become an existing non-conforming building? And if they needed to make would they have to remediate? I'm not sure how the planning board would typically handle that in another sense. But this issue will keep coming up. As to Michelle's comment around how do we refer to affordable housing in the special permit if we know that there's this end period, you may want to, or you may consider referencing the determination letter from our office, because they are affordable units, consistent with that determination letter, which spells out the affordability period and affordability term and things of that nature. So that way, if you so chose, that way you could be consistent with that letter and self-reference, if you will, that term. That does not solve all your problems, I know, but hopefully that's helpful.
Okay, thank you. Risa Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was trying to think of a way to put a qualifier on the homeownership affordable housing units. So what Director Pratt said may help, but referencing I just lost my train of thought of what he was saying, but using the reference that he just provided. But my other question was, again, that staggered release of affordable units, like how do you address that if it's year 16 and one or two are now they're at market rate, and then another few years later? So how I'm not sure how we address that in this condition.
Okay, I share your concern.
So I'm not sure if the qualifier will address that part of it.
Okay, anything else?
That is all. Thank you.
Thank you. Diane Chuha.
I had a couple of things. One, just because they're affordable units doesn't mean they only have one car. Affordable unit can have two or more. So they could be parking on the street regardless if it's a market rate unit or an affordable unit. They could have more than one car. So I just kind of wanted to say that. A lot of times there probably is going to be a deed restriction for anybody who's buying the property that has to be an affordable unit. I don't know if they're planning on doing that, but there will be a deed restriction saying for so many years it's going to have to be affordable. My concern, however, is hearing from the people that were opposed to this saying that they weren't aware of what was going on and they had no meetings with the city councilor. That just blew my mind, because this is a big development going in a neighborhood and nobody was notified. I mean, we have a letter from the city councilor speaking in favor of it, but I don't know if there was any community outreach, if there were any people meetings, there's if you.
Yep, okay. Sorry. Hold on, Diane.
No, I mean, that was pretty much, my thing, and, coupled with all the other issues that might be coming up, I know trying to get more parking in there, when it's market rate to have them come before a special permit, you can't do that. So I think we, squashed that. But my biggest thing is I want to make sure that, all the neighbors were reached. From what I heard was some got the notices, some didn't, some were unable to attend. I'm kind of upset that I got a letter from the ward councilor, but he's not here, speaking to his constituents that were not happy with it. And I expected the place to be mobbed, knowing that a 35-unit building was going up, regardless if it was affordable or not. So I just wanted to make sure that they did have community outreach to the neighbors, and how many meetings they had, because, again, I like the idea, I like the concept, but I'm just a little concerned that the neighbors weren't notified or there wasn't enough of them. I'd like to know how many people attended the meeting, if there was more of an outreach. That's.
Okay, and I'll ask the petitioner to come up and speak to that. So if you could describe how many meetings you had, what the nature of the outreach was, because I think some of the people tonight are responding to the fact that the city sends out notices because they're abutters.
Right.
So if you could just describe what you did, how many meetings you had, how well it was attended, if some of the people that you saw in the audience attended those meetings, if they raised concerns at these meetings and how you addressed them, that type of thing, please.
Sure. So we had our first public meeting, I can't remember the exact date, but it was here at City Hall. Counselor Simonelli was there, OSB CD was in attendance. I would say there's probably like 15 people there. There were, sorry? 26 people? Sorry, there were 26 people in attendance.
If you, please don't interrupt.
And we presented on the project, the original design, not this updated design. We presented on the project, we shared the different affordability levels, we shared basically just the program of the project, et cetera, the parking. We didn't yet have that historic commission review at that point. That was following that. So that was our first public meeting. This gentleman here was present along with, I don't remember your name, I apologize. But we did also have a couple other people, residents, et cetera, at the meeting. Some asked questions about how they could qualify for these units. Some expressed concern over the fact that they were low AMI, which means they didn't necessarily qualify because they made more money than was allowed for what we're restricting the units at. We talked a little bit about that and the policies surrounding that. There was concern about the density, the level of just the amount of units on site, which is always a concern when we're developing multifamily housing. Again, we will happily continue to address that density concern, but it is just a bigger picture concern about development. And I think there was concern about demolition, which I heard from the gentleman behind me, specifically around asbestos and things that kind of populate the air when you do a demolition. We discussed the fact that we would have a certified contractor doing that work, and therefore they would be certified to protect and the area from those emissions, et cetera. So those were some of the conversations we had. Councilor Simonelli spoke at that meeting. That was the first community meeting, of which we expect to actually have a few more to continue to inform the neighbors of timeline of what construction management looks like, meaning is there a sidewalk that's gonna be closed? When is demolition gonna happen? All of these different things, which we can't speak to at the moment because we don't have a timeline for that, because we don't have the permit and we don't have the funding. But once we're able to actually secure more of that, we can have further conversations. And same with the design. So the reason why we have yet to go back to the residents and abutters about the updated design is because we had to go to the Historic Commission, which are also public meetings, which are also advertised. So we had 2 physical in-person three in-person meetings with the Historic Commission. The first in which they issued the demo delay. The second in which we provided them, I think maybe it's 2 or I can't remember, but we had at least 2 of those in person, which are public meetings, and at which point the Historic Commission did approve the design that we portrayed to you all today, sans the color palette and other different, little bits, which we will then take back to the residents who attended originally that community meeting to then inform them of all the updates we've made since we first met with them. So a lot of this is process. It's not about not sharing information. It's just we do things very methodically because we don't want to make promises we can't keep. We don't want to show images that are irrelevant. And if I host a community meeting and I tell you something, I could send you an email, you'd probably be really frustrated with me. And we experience that in our day-to-day. So that's kind of the process we're in. That doesn't mean we're not having any more. It just means that we've had 1 meeting here and then 3 Historic Commission meeting at City Hall as well. But that's not all that we're planning to do or intend to do,
So there was 1 meeting here at City Hall, not at the location?
Correct, not at the physical location.
Okay, and at that 1 meeting at City Hall, did anyone bring up issues like traffic, parking, or design concerns?
Design concerns did arise, and that's mainly around just the materials. I think people are frustrated with metal panels in general, which is acceptable and understandable. So that did come up, which is good that we're able to kind of adapt the design. I honestly don't have the notes in front of me from that meeting. I'm sure there was traffic and parking concerns that were arisen because they come up at every single public meeting for development. So I'm sure that it did come up, which is why we're continuing to have the discussion here today. But then also why we did the traffic report with the peer review from the city as well, to make sure that we're addressing all those concerns as we move forward.
See, the concern, and if others disagree, definitely weigh in. The concern is if we move forward and approve this tonight, and you just mentioned that there are going to be more community meetings to resolve issues, how does that get enforced? You walk away with a special permit, and then Mr. Cook comes back and says, I don't like the design, how are we going to impact parking, and how are we going to reduce traffic? How are you going to satisfy Mr. Cook?
We can't make changes that are substantial in that way. That would require us to come back and seek a new permit. And we understand that because we are developers. Like, that is something that is comprehensive. And that's something we would communicate to the people that we're speaking to. So if they're voicing a concern that we can no longer address, that's something that we would be transparent about and say, that's something that was approved at this hearing, let's just say, that we can't change. The thing about like parking, for example, and traffic concerns, that's why we do the study, we do the peer review to make sure that we are addressing the concerns, that are in the report, but there are also other concerns just from everyday lived experience in that neighborhood, in that vicinity, that we can't pick each one and answer to each one because it's just impossible to do so. So what we do, and we're coming here to do so, is understand the approvals that we are seeking and then make determinations and changes based on that. We're not gonna change the structure of the building. We're not gonna increase a setback or decrease a setback. What people are able to inform, such as the material, like if it's a color palette, but same as with the Historic Commission, they asked us, are you telling us you're gonna do this much brick and then you're gonna come back and be like, actually, we can't afford it, we're gonna do this much brick? We won't do that because first of all, we wouldn't stand behind it. And we've also gotten it priced so that we can make sure it actually fits into our budget before we even present it to the Historic Commission. So as a developer who's community-based and focused, we're not trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes and say, yeah, we'll have a conversation and we'll talk about that later. But really, this is the structure of the building, this is the bones, and now we're building up the little, things that we can actually impact outside of the bones and the structure. And that's the stuff we want to talk about with residents, So I apologize that, I will continue to apologize if residents do have concerns about the parking, but this is the thing that we're seeking. And so if we're able to be awarded it, then that's the communication I would have, because that's just what zoning says.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, Stephanie Stone.
Yeah, as far as, the planning for the site, we've said here it is unusual to have the 100% inclusionary housing, and why, were there thoughts about making it more of a mixture and the amount, and I'm curious too about the amount of units and stories, if that was sort of in debate, or was this really set in stone for a while?
So the issue is that we look at the zoning and we say, that's kind of where you start. It's like, what can you build? What is allowed? And we build all affordable housing. That's our mission. That's what we do. And honestly, we feel really strongly and, think that it's really important to do so. The city has expressed interest in having more affordable homeownership opportunities, which Councilor Simonelli supports, which is why this here. So with the affordable homeownership, there are restrictions that come with the funding mechanisms that you're basically using to build the housing. Same with if you did affordable rental. Affordable rental tends to be more like flexible in certain ways because it's been around significantly longer than affordable homeownership funding. So they've built all these different mechanisms into their restrictions. So for example, if this was an affordable rental, all rental, we could keep it affordable in perpetuity because we set that restriction. The state actually wants it to be in perpetuity. And speaking to, you know, what Alex was saying is that mass housing is that quasi-public, and EOHLC, the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, is the state agency, and they view home ownership and affordable home ownership very differently. One views it as a way for wealth generation, which it has been for many, many years. And the other views it as, we want to just make affordable units and keep them affordable so everyone can have affordable units. So when those two bodies combine, they have conflicting values. And so that's why these policies are not in line with each other. So that's not something, you know, we obviously would love for these to stay affordable in perpetuity, and therefore you wouldn't even have to debate the fact over this parking conversation, but we have no control over that. So we have to follow the rules that the funding allows us to do. So it just depends on what it ends up being.
Thank you.
Okay, Michelle, you had something?
Well, I did want to just comment, the petitioner had mentioned the Historical Commission. The meeting on June 23rd of this year, the Historical Commission held a public hearing, and that was to consider whether the building, or the public hearing was required prior to them making a determination whether the building was preferably preserved. That hearing, abutters were given notice of. It was specifically a hearing regarding the demolition. So I did want to just note that. As the petitioner said, all the meetings of the Historical Commission are posted, but abutters don't get notice of all the meetings. They did get notice of this one hearing, though. This was on January 23rd. So the same abutters that got notice of this meeting, of this hearing tonight, got notice of that. So there were several meetings where the petitioner has come to Historical Commission, but abutters weren't notified, at least not directly. It was just through, you know, the agendas were posted. So you would have to look on the website to see that. So there was a public hearing held
Okay.
here in City Hall. So I wanted to clarify that. And then I have some info when we get to it about preservation of affordability that's in the ordinance.
Okay, and how did you reach out to folks the first time for that first meeting here at City Hall?
We have to do a mailing for that, so we individually mailed within, I believe, the required radius of mailings for all the homes surrounding the development. We physically.
Did you get the list from the city?
Correct, yes. So that mailing went out. I personally folded and stamped all the envelopes.
Okay,
And-
no, just trying to understand how,
Yeah, and
what
we post on
happened.
our social media too. I mean, granted, I'm sure the abutters don't necessarily follow our social media, but some of the people we work with in the community do. So we also did that as well.
Director Pratt?
Thank you. Just to add, so speaking on the city's part, we notified residents a number of ways. The city's Facebook page, we did a press release which got into the Malden Advocate in advance of the hearing. We notified, we have a newsletter in our office with, I think it's about 2,000 or so subscribers, and we mentioned the event there. We also have a project-specific page on the city's Transparency Center, ClearGov. And so if you go to cityofmalden.org/245 Bryant, you'll see all the information, recording from this November meeting, the presentation from the meeting. I believe even the translations from those meetings are, from that meeting is available up there. And we regularly update that page, in addition to the notices that the developer does and the work on their social media and on their end. We do this for, I think, all of our affordable housing projects. We do this type of outreach. Just to try to get the word out.
Okay, thank you. Michelle?
Yes, I just wanted to, reading the inclusionary zoning ordinance. So one of the requirements concerns preservation of affordability. It reads, affordable housing units required and provided under the provisions of this ordinance shall remain affordable to the designated income group in perpetuity or for as long as legally permissible. Then it talks about the restrictions by legally permissible instruments, such as deed covenants, restrictions, agreements, et cetera, to ensure long-term affordability and compliance with this ordinance. So that memorandum part of the documentation you received addresses that, what type of covenants and things are going to be put in. But I was thinking, you know, in terms of this condition, I definitely think, the condition, I would definitely recommend that all units shall be home ownership units, right? So there, that definitely, I just don't believe we can say all units shall be home ownership affordable housing units. So I was going to suggest the condition be modified to say all units shall be home ownership units, and all units shall remain as affordable housing units, capital AHU, for as long as legally permissible. I don't know if we need to also mention funding, or if that will be covered, as long as we say, you know, as long as legally permissible. I don't know if the funding is technically a legal restriction, or it's a funding restriction, in which case we could say as long as legally permissible, and, you know, allowed by funding. I guess the concern or question is, of course, if the funding changes, it could change from 15 to 20 years, it could change from 15 to 14. Who knows how the funding mechanism will change? I would think we should at the very least try to ensure that they're going to remain affordable housing units as long as legally permissible. And that's what the ordinance says, but I don't honestly know, does the funding override that? We're saying this in the ordinance, but what if the funding for the project says otherwise? I'm suggesting we, you know, add a condition that reflects what the ordinance says. And the other two things I wanted to mention, there are sections of this ordinance, again, the reason we ask for the compliance letter is because we're not familiar, I'm not familiar, Nelson Miller is not familiar with all the ins and outs of the details of the inclusionary zoning provisions, the annual income thresholds, and there's a lot of technical information that goes into that. So the reason they provide us with the compliance letter is so that they've vetted and gone through that the units are gonna comply. There is a provision that says right of first refusal. The developer of an affordable home ownership unit developed as a result of this ordinance shall agree to execute a deed rider consistent with the model riders prepared by the state, granting, among other things, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund right of first refusal to purchase the property at the point of original sale or any subsequent resale in the event that a qualified purchaser cannot be located or in the event of foreclosure. So that contemplates, though, that we can't, the seller can't find an affordable housing candidate to purchase. If in fact they can sell market rate, I don't think this is going to be triggered, because this is, the Affordable Housing Trust isn't going to buy a market rate unit. They would want to buy the affordable housing unit. So I don't think this is going to require them to come to the city to sell the unit, is all the long story I'm trying to get to. So again, this is the first I'm hearing of that part of it, so I'm not really sure. The right of first refusal, there's another provision here that also talks about home ownership. If the owner shall decide to sell, dispose of, or otherwise convey a home ownership affordable housing unit, the owner shall notify the city of Malden prior to listing the property for sale to ensure compliance with the requirements of the ordinance. So that, I would think, will apply, but compliance with the ordinance is that it remain affordable. What if the funding is saying it can't, the restriction says you've reached it, the maximum of 15. So that's the part I don't know, I'm not familiar with. So I can't say. But I'm calling your attention to those because I think that the right of first refusal was mentioned. I'm just saying, I don't know how that will connect, how this will connect with the ordinance, enforcing the ordinance. You're being asked to grant a special permit in accordance with the ordinance today.
Excuse me, Director Pratt, can you step up to the microphone? Given what Michelle just read through, and that's what I had seen in reading all the materials in preparation for tonight, this idea that if anyone wants to sell their affordable unit, they have to come to the city first, whether it be the city or the Affordable Trust Fund or whichever is associated with that. Let me ask you a question. Community funding, what's the name of that group? Community building?
Commonwealth Builder.
Are they out of the picture once they paid off the loan?
I believe so.
ACDC secures a loan, right? Whatever the amount is. They sell the 35 units. They pay Community Funding Group.
It's a mass housing program, so we could say it's mass housing that they get, that
Okay, so they
provides
pay the
loans.
state,
Yep.
right? Now, what role do they pay now that they've been fully reimbursed for what they lent?
What role does
are
mass
we,
housing
are we
play?
getting ourselves spun around the axle about this 15 years it expires? If they're out of the picture, can't the city impose our requirement that it be held in perpetuity or whatever it is legally responsible?
I don't believe we would have that ability because the affordability restriction is agreed to at construction closing. And that's when mass housing and all the other funders, although mass housing is by far and away the biggest funder for this type of project.
Yeah, but they're out of the picture, they got their money back.
Once they're out of the picture, that restriction still holds. And the condo association, the owners, would then need to agree to any additional agreement or restriction on that property, which I suppose hypothetically they could do. I'm not sure if mass housing would have some legal right there where they could potentially object to it, or would they even know if they were paid out? I don't know. But I don't know that the condo association would agree to that anyway, and any requirement that I think we would put in now to that effect would prevent mass housing from funding the project, because they will review the conditions of the special permit, and if they see anything that makes them think we're not abiding by their 15-year rule,
But if,
we could have an
and
issue.
just bear with me and
Yeah.
just follow what I'm thinking about. The option is they're okay for 15 years and then all of a sudden they're in violation. Year 16, when they all become market rate, they're in violation.
Of the
Would
special
that
permit.
incentivize the condo association to pursue a longer term?
Maybe. And I'm not sure how mass housing would respond to this, but my assumption is that when mass housing reviews ACDC's funding application and they see a special permit that puts the project, the future condo association at risk in years 16 unless the affordability is extended, my guess is they're not going to fund the project until that issue is resolved to their satisfaction. And as the biggest funder in the room, they kind of get to call off shots, unfortunately.
Is this also new that this is the first time this issue's come up?
It came up, it's come up in some other communities that we work with. We have we call it the Federal Home Program. We administer that with 7 other communities around Malden, and they have had a couple home ownership projects with Commonwealth Builder. I think Chelsea and Everett both had this type of issue come up. It's the first affordable home ownership project in Malden besides Overlook Ridge where this has come up. We went through a lot of this with Overlook Ridge, not on the parking or the density, but on the term, and they would not budge on the 15 years. But we did get, the victory for us there was that EOHLC, the fully public state agency, agreed to put the units on the SHI, which we believe they will going forward. The downside was that Commonwealth Builder would not, mass housing would not extend beyond their 15 years, and that was a deal breaker for them. And as the biggest funding source by far.
So did the projects not move forward in Chelsea and Everett?
They are moving forward. I believe they're both stuck with a 15-year period, and now they're trying to figure out if there's any way that the cities can cobble money together 15 years from now to extend that. But they did not, I don't think they negotiated with EOHLC in the way that we did before, so I'm not sure if they've secured their units on the SHI yet. I'll also say the Commonwealth Builder Program, it's only been around for a few years. The first couple of years, some of these rules were changing. We were hoping that that meant that there was an avenue for us to advocate for this change. And we did meet with them several times, but they feel strongly. And to Muge's point, you know, there is a public benefit to both our approach and to their approach. Their approach is, you know, after 15 years of affordability, that's a big wealth generation tool for that household, which, you know, is a priority of ours as well, but we do prioritize the long-term affordability because we know that 15 years from now, our community is still gonna want that to be affordable housing. And that's really been, that's the policy debate, and there are, you know, all the leading figures in state housing policy have weighed in on this, and we've made our case, but as of now, and it looks like for the foreseeable future, if you want to build affordable housing in Massachusetts, you build it for 15 years of affordability with mass housing, or you don't build it at all.
Okay, thank you. Michelle, did you have something?
I just have one comment. So was there any consideration to, given all this, and I mean, I heard clearly what you just said, which is what was always my understanding, we want long-term affordability, right? We don't, that's the point of getting it on the SHI and getting it with these, all these, you know, in perpetuity, as long as legal permissible. Why would you not do rentals so that we can be guaranteed, the city will know we are gaining 35 affordable housing units in perpetuity? Why is that not, you know, I guess if I could, I know that's closed, but I'm curious, was that did you give any consideration to doing that? And could, and also related to that, what if a permit were granted and it's not of home ownership units, therefore affordable housing units that aren't
So
home ownership?
the mayor and Councilor Simonelli both felt very strongly that where we have an opportunity to build affordable home ownership, which is, as Muge said, relatively new, that there are programs that fund affordable home ownership, that we should do that. And if Councilor Simonelli were here, I think he would likely note that his neighborhood has a great number of affordable rental projects, which are a benefit to his neighborhood, but he's hoping that with an affordable homeownership project that has a high Malden resident preference, that a lot of those residents who are in those affordable rental units will have the opportunity to move into an affordable homeownership unit, which then benefits, you know, not just that resident, but the resident who then moves into the newly vacated rental unit. So, you know, he's kind of thinking about a ladder of housing opportunity. So that's why affordability was, you know, a priority here of both the mayors and of the councilors. I'm not sure I understood your second question, Michelle, regarding the special permit and whether or not it would be home ownership or rental.
If the special permit didn't specify that it was home ownership, and or did specify that it was not home ownership, that they would be rental units, what's the status of the project? Have you already, I mean, would the design change, would anything about the project change? If it wasn't a condo?
Our IZ letter of compliance would change.
Your what?
Our inclusionary zoning compliance letter would change. There are different rules under inclusionary zoning for home ownership versus rental projects. Home ownership projects are very difficult to make financially feasible at thresholds lower than 80% AMI. Practically no one does them because those projects tend not to be able to maintain the properties. But rental projects can at lower thresholds. So you get, you know, we treat rental and home ownership projects differently. And the IZ compliance letter that is part of your packet was based on this home ownership project. I'm sure there are also likely
Oh, no, I
building and
understand the
design-
letter would change, but I mean, I'm
Yeah.
saying, you know, what changes about the project? You know,
You
you
would-
still do 35 units, you still do 7 singles, you know, how many 3 bedrooms? I mean, is there any
There would be
You know.
different funding sources, so you'd go from trying to meet all of Mass Housing's requirements to meeting, I imagine it's typically what we call a LIHTC deal, or it's a federal low-income housing tax credit deal, and those are, and Muge will know better than me, I believe it's a mix of 60%, it's primarily 60% AMI with some 30% AMI units, and that program has its own preferred breakdown of ones, twos, and whatever the mix is, they set that. And I'm sure there might be other funding sources in there that might have their own preferences around maybe an accessible unit or, whatever else it can be.
No, I understand technical things. I was just saying, can you not do the project if it's not homeownership?
We
Is
want
that
to do
the-
it. We want to do homeownership
Yeah.
here because it presents. Homeownership projects are. I'll say affordable housing in general is difficult to do. Homeownership projects are especially difficult to do for a number of reasons. And where we had an opportunity here to do that, we wanted to take advantage of that opportunity.
Okay, Diane, did you have something?
Just kind of, forgive me if I'm going on, but with Mass Housing, I know that they do personal loans. So
Yes.
the people buying these properties, the first-time home buyers, I'm assuming, unless they've not owned a home maybe in 7 years, but they can qualify for affordable if they meet the criteria.
I believe that's correct. Yes.
So there's no, is there if someone uses Mass Housing, is it, I'm trying to think of the word and I can't
As the
think of it.
lender,
Excuse me?
as their mortgage provider.
Right, like, exactly, are they a preferred mortgage lender? Because if, they're the big guys funding it, but they're also hoping to get the money back from all these first-time home buyers, because I know my first-time home buyers, the first place I tell them to go to is Mass Housing. So I'm assuming that's what they're gonna do. So I was just wondering if that's a connection, like, that's probably how they're gonna pay off the loan and then get the money back. That's why Mass Housing is investing so much money in here, because they're gonna get probably a big chunk of it back, I'm assuming.
Those are two separate programs through Mass Housing. One is the down payment assistance to first-time home buyers, and then the other is the Commonwealth Builder Program. The Commonwealth Builder Program funds were all allocated by the state legislature and the governor. I'm not certain where the down payment assistance program is funded, but it's been in existence for a while now, so it's possible that it's revolving or there are other funds involved in there. So they're funded separately. I don't know if Mass Housing could require that the buyers be financed through them. There are, I think, to my knowledge, two major, if you're a low-income first-time home buyer, there are probably two places you're likely to go. The first is Mass Housing, and the second is it Metro Housing Boston? Metro Housing Boston, and they also have different, each program has different benefits, pros and cons, and different, I think Mass Housing has a benefit where if you're a low-income first-time buyer, they'll give you a 6-month grace period if you fall behind, and they'll just extend your loan, penalty-free. And I think Mass Housing Partnership has, I'm sorry, it's Mass Housing Partnership, not Metro Housing Boston. Too many organizations with similar names. Mass Housing Partnership has other, like I would call them small tweaks to their financing benefits that might appeal to some buyers and not others. I haven't heard that Mass Housing would require that buyers of
That's good to know.
Commonwealth Builder units go through them. I don't think they can.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be news to me if so.
Okay.
And I don't think that their investment of, I'm sure, they make money off of those subsidized loans, but not as much as any other bank would because they are subsidized. I don't think their mortgage program feeds into the Commonwealth Builder Program or vice versa.
All right, thank you.
Just to give you background, the proceeds from the sales are used to pay back Mass Housing. So it's not based on, it's not because they're using their first-time home buyer program.
Okay.
But we do work with a bunch of different banks to actually get mortgages approvable by these banks because affordable housing is its own beast for mortgages as well, for
Okay,
banks.
thank you. And
You all set, Diane?
I'm all set with him, but I wanted to ask a question to you.
To me?
Yes, if you wouldn't mind. Well,
I don't know
well,
anything.
you're the chair. So we heard that they had a meeting. I brought it up because the gentleman, Mr. Cook, told me that they didn't know anything about it. Would it be okay if I asked him, Mr. Cook, you know, was they said he was at the meeting, so what other meetings is he looking
Mr. Cook,
for?
would you like to come up to the
I-
podium
Just to
and
see if Chris
answer?
Simonelli reached out to him, like,
Well, he's at the meeting, so he
well,
he
yeah,
must have.
so.
but- Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, just to clarify, because I was a little confused that you said there was no outreach and then you were at a meeting.
Yeah, no, I know Chris well. I've known Chris for years, and I talked to him briefly, but I mean, he didn't lean either way. He just said that he was trying to help out both his constituent, being the Temple, and trying to help, with the housing crisis. That's as far as I went. I don't know about his full support. I very don't think he supports 35 units. I talked to him briefly about it.
Yeah, well, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure
And
that you
the
did
other
have an
thing,
opportunity
just to
to
be
talk
clear
him.
too, as you said, they had 3 meetings for the Historical Commission. I was notified one. I know the rest, she said we weren't notified. I couldn't make that one. So, I mean, that's life. I mean, the communications here is terrible and not giving people, I didn't get the notice for this meeting till last week, but I was told by the city it went out on the 10th. And it wasn't mailed here, it was mailed to a different address. And I believe it says residents and abutters. So they're using the tax records to send out the notices. I know my 2 next door neighbors didn't get notices. A third around the corner, she did get her notice. So I mean, the communication, and you're gonna make a decision that is gonna affect our lives in so many different ways, from our property values to our butters' rights, to the traffic. And I just don't see how you can move forward and vote this in. And then they're saying, well, they wanna talk to us. Once they get the permit, they don't talk to us. And my thing at the first meeting that they had, the only meeting, was pretty much, we're doing this project and that's it. And it's all on Zoom, so you guys could all, actually get to watch it because it was all recorded. And you'll see I raised very many points that weren't never addressed. So, I mean, you're gonna do something that's gonna transform the neighborhood, and it's supposed to be for the greater good of the city. That area is already highly concentrated in low-income housing. We have the most in the whole city in Ward 7. So, I mean, I want you to look at every area. Like I said, I'm not opposed to the low-income housing, but I'm opposed to the numbers, the size of the building, and every other direction that's gonna affect me. I think the buildings face a different direction. There's so many things that if they just would sit down and listen to us, I'm not the only one. Unfortunately, we all work, and we just can't come to a meeting. If you don't give us, enough time to do it, we can't come. And I mean, I'm seeing the 7 o'clock at night meeting is, a little rough for people that work. So, thank you, and if you have any questions, I'd always be free to answer
All
them.
right, thank you.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions? Michelle, did you have anything else?
No.
Just addressing the trash setback, the 20 feet, that's not listed as a condition, or does it need to be?
That would be covered by all development shall be as per plans, except as modified by these conditions. So that would be included as showing that, so you wouldn't need a separate condition. Unless you wanted them to move it, and then you would want to put a condition that said, shall be relocated to comply with the ordinance, or relocated to wherever. These conditions, the first condition is all development shall be as per plan. So you're approving what they're proposing unless it's modified. So unless you wanted to change the truss location, that will get approved, if you want to approve it. If you don't want to approve it, you'll need to either add a condition or request, a modified plan.
But you are saying in the plan, it doesn't comply with citing requirements.
It does
that
not
prohibit.
comply. It does
Okay.
not comply. So that's up to you. Again, so that's considered an increase or a creation of a violation. The location of the dumpsters is a parking requirement. So they're creating that violation. Right now, the dumpsters are up against the building. You can see in some of the pictures I took, they're up against that. So this would be one of the new violations. If you make the finding that will not be more detrimental to the neighborhood. So that's my recommendations, provided that you make those findings. If you don't make that finding, then you would need to include a condition that requires them to relocate the dumpster.
Right, and
Stephanie?
yeah, and because it's at the street line, that's,
It's a property line,
yeah, yeah,
right?
okay.
It's any property line.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Diane Chuha.
Yeah, I'm just having a little query where I think it's a good complex. I think it's a great idea for the affordable housing, but I think there's so many unanswered questions that I have. And I was just questioning, you know, if we were to table this, is that going to throw off everything? I mean, I know we did a special meeting for this, but I just feel like you need a little bit more information, maybe regarding not the parking situation, but the affordable aspect of it. You know, the city solicitor, can they say something to the effect, I don't know if Commonwealth Builders, if this is, you know, mandatory that it's 15, a max of 15 years. I mean, I'd like to have Chris Simonelli, if he met with the constituents, you know, I know other ward councilors had it at the site, or, you know, they did everything. I know looking at notices, not everybody does it. Sometimes when they get a notice in the mail, if it especially says "or resident," they just put it, you know, throw it away. So I just want to make sure that we're grabbing everyone's attention on this, because it is a big change to that neighborhood, huge. And they do have a lot of affordable housing in that neighborhood, which is not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. And I think the building itself is nice, but I just think there's too many unanswered questions. So my question to you is, if tabling is something that we should do?
Well, you
or
can
this?
certainly make a motion to table, and then we would see if there's a second and then vote on it.
And it would be tabling the
Well,
whole meeting?
That would be
Okay.
what you'd need to define as, I was just gonna
okay.
say, you need to be very specific about what you're tabling and what information you're requesting. Are you requesting information from the city councilor, the city solicitor, the OSPCD about Community Development Corporation or the funding? Are you asking about what other alternatives we might have? What is it that your reason for your tabling? Are you just, because there seem to be a lot of questions, but what are they? And when we reconvene, because it's probably not going to reconvene until September or maybe later, so it's going to delay it a while. If it does get tabled, you know, what is it, information? How long is it going to take them to get that, collect that information and run it down and resolve it? So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to put them out, because like I said, I like it on its face value. I'm just concerned over a few of the things. Yeah. Right. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna comment on one thing. So we did do, and I did actually have a conversation with Mr. Cook about this. The city does follow the state statute in terms of giving notice. And the abutters are defined, it's not necessarily the person that lives, it's not a resident. This is where we have to use the official list that's certified by the city assessor. So it's the assessor maintaining the applicable tax list shall certify to the permit granting authority the names and addresses. Okay, so we have to use the same property owner's name and address that gets the tax bill. So we get the list certified from the assessor. That's what's required by statute and our zoning. That's not to say we couldn't notify residents or tenants, but it's not required and we don't do it. We've never done that. It's up, you know, the petitioner certainly could. Again, you know, if it's a 3-family house, but it's owned by somebody that lives in another city, that person gets the notice. It would be up to the property owner to notify the tenants. We don't send separate notices to tenants or residents, so we're not required to. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, I'm just telling you what the requirement is and what the city follows. So, I wanted to mention that in terms of tabling, if you were to table the matter, I would suggest if you're expecting to get new information, you also table the public hearing, because you would want to be able to hear from members of the public again on any new plans or any revised parts of the proposal. If that is something you're looking for, as the chair said, if you're looking for additional information, we'd like to see a site plan that moves the trash, for example, right? That's something, and I'm not saying that's what you're doing it for, but if it's for you to get more information to assist you to make the decision, then you could just table the decision, not the public hearing. So you want an opinion from the city solicitor, you want additional information about, you know, that 15-year affordability restriction. I think that that's correct, because we did hear it during the road quarry hearing. So I'm not questioning that there's a 15-year maximum restriction, as Alex Pratt told us. I think that's correct in the sense of that's true. What my question was, is that okay that in 15 years these turn potentially to market rate? That's what I was questioning, not whether there really is a 15-year. How does that, the funding restriction, interplay with our ordinance? That I don't know. I don't know if that would override our ordinance that says it must be in perpetuity, that it's affordable housing. Or if it would be, as we heard, they're gonna look at the permit and see all units shall remain affordable and in perpetuity, and the funding source is gonna say, we won't fund that with that condition in there. So I don't, that would be the interplay, if you will, with that. So tabling, is, the chair said you could table to your next meeting. Right now, your next meeting is scheduled for July 9th. I don't know if 2 weeks is enough time to provide any of this information, or it would be moved to the next meeting that you schedule, your next regular meeting, which, you know, tentatively would be August. If there's no meeting in August, if there's no petitions ready for public hearing, we wouldn't schedule, but unless this were coming in, we could, you know, you do have a regular meeting tentatively scheduled. So I don't know, I would definitely be, as the chair said, as specific as you itemize why you're tabling it and what exactly you want, which is what you've done before if you table something, so that we know, we meaning me, I know exactly what to look for before we reschedule it.
I'm all set. I'm kind of changing my mind.
What's that?
I said I'm kind of changing my mind on tabling.
Okay, Alex Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to speak to the question Michelle raised about the ordinance language about as long as legally permissible and how that ties in with the funding source. That was something that we also spoke with the city solicitor about with the Overlook project, because it was also with the Commonwealth Builder Funds and had the same challenge. And she determined that the language of the ordinance was consistent with that funding source, in part because this is a conversation from 6 months ago. So I don't want to put words in her mouth, but one of the considerations was that this is a state funding source, and to be legally permissible with that funding source, it has to be less than in perpetuity. There's a larger debate in affordable housing that I won't bore you all with about whether legally in perpetuity is a legally enforceable action, or does it revert to, you know, some like 99 years or anything like that. But the attorneys on this stuff know far more than me, and they don't know the answer to that. So that's not really pertinent here.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments for Michelle? If not, is there a motion? Patrick Hayes.
I think the affordable housing aspect of the project is something that we need, and I know there are some challenges and there's some folks in the neighborhood that are against it, but I think the need of that outweighs some of those other issues for me in my vote here. So I'd like to make a motion that we grant the petition with the conditions that Michelle had laid out.
Ken Antonucci.
I'll second Pat's motion.
Could I, Mr. Chair, just, I want to clarify, so the conditions that I read, including the additional conditions and the additional language, one had to do with condition 2. I just want to clarify, you amended condition 4D, so condition 2, I recommended you separate to say all shall be home ownership and all shall be affordable housing for as long as legally permissible.
Correct.
That was that, okay. I just want to double check because we talked about a lot. 4D you amended, you eliminated that last phrase. So you ended at safety measures. And then we added condition 8, which extends the expiration, so it expires June 30th, 2027. And then condition 9, screen rooftop equipment visually acoustically. And that, I'm sorry, I also forgot the amendment of condition 7. We added a provision that says exterior plans, exterior, I guess I should say slash facade plans may be modified to comply with MHC determination.
Correct.
Okay, just wanted to double check that. So that's 9 conditions. Thank you.
Okay. On the vote, Michelle, let me know when you're ready. Go ahead.
Ken Antonucci,
Yes.
Diane Chuha,
Yes.
Michelle Ferguson,
Yes.
Tawadej Gebrselassie,
Yes.
Risa Gray,
Yes.
Patrick Hayes,
Yes.
Stephanie Stone,
Yes.
Chuck Ioven.
Yes. Petition has been granted with conditions. Thank you. Yeah, I grew up in that area and I walked it the other day.
I'm just asking.
Okay? Okay, next item on the agenda. Well, Ronnie's not here, so we don't have a Community Preservation Committee update. And Michelle, do you have a master plan activity and open space and recreation?
No, I don't have any update. The Master Plan Steering Committee met last, well, not since our last meeting, no, there's no update. So they met last month, we're scheduled to meet again on Monday. The person that was giving you the written reports has left. So they no longer work for OSPCD, so they don't, there's nobody there available to give you a written report on anything.
Okay,
that's it.
next meeting scheduled for July 9th. That's a regularly scheduled meeting. At the moment, we have what, one hearing?
There is only one, yes.
So July 9th would be the next regularly scheduled meeting. If there's no other questions, is there a motion to adjourn? Diane Chuha, and Ken Antonucci, seconds. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Happy 4th of July, everyone.
Do you want to briefly introduce the new member?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
She's been there and everyone's like, Usually at the beginning, I thought you were gonna do it at the beginning.
Well, no, she slipped in right at 7. So, everyone, Michelle Ferguson, a new associate member. And I'm sure you read the names as we were around. But welcome and good luck, and nice way to cut your teeth.